Welcome. Call to order at 6:02 p.m. The Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District Board meeting. It's Wednesday, August 14th, again at 6:02. Welcome to everyone. If you can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the next pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag and pledge allegiance to thee in Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, everyone. So now we'll move on to agenda item 2, public comments, 3 minutes per person. If there's anyone that would like to have some public comments, please sign up with the staff. I've got one person here, and if there's anyone online, can you please raise your hand or just say something if you've got any public comments? Anyone online?
Don't see anyone.
I don't see anyone with the chat or any. Okay, so we've got one person, and that is Andy Weir. Mr. Weir.
Good evening. I'm Andy Weir, Executive Director with Simsboro Aquifer Water Defense Fund. On speaking on agenda items C, D, and E, and D and F. So to begin with, putting agenda items C, D, and E together, where we're talking about the DFC water levels and water quality monitoring, I thought it complements the consultant LRE comprehensive review, and we support their recommendations. I do want to highlight for you their recommendation 4.2.1, which says initiate a Colorado River alluvium monitoring program. SAWDF and environmental stewardship, and Mr. Steve Fox is online, have frequently advocated for monitoring the Colorado River alluvium over the years. As LRE notes, there's a lot of wells in that alluvium, and they recommend that even though the alluvium is not presently a major or minor aquifer as defined by the state, that might be changing. So with the GMA 12 meeting just a few last week,
I don't know how to get this, just there.
The GMA 12 meeting, the Water Development Board noted that they posted comment with the Texas Register a change in the definition of a relevant aquifer as regards to desired future conditions. And that change will be a major or minor aquifer or any significant aquifer be relevant to their discussion. So if those definitions get approved, then Lost Pines could make a motion at GMA 12 to include the Colorado River aquifer, river alluvium, as part of the desired future conditions. And then it would be very important to the district. And so that's a good reason to be monitoring it, getting ahead of the game. And those changes are coming. But I guess the short end of that is to say the state agrees with you. That's an important place to be monitoring. On G, there's the compliance report. It's a great report, and I love the fact that it's very concise. It just sticks to the business. I want to offer some comments that would improve the report. Table 3 lists the non-exempt production by permit holders. We would add that we would recommend having all the permit holders that are out there, because there's some that haven't started producing yet, and they're big permit holders, Gatehouse and Recharge, and those would have been available in 2023, and those are significant. That's like almost 60,000 acre feet of water. So because the general manager points out in table number 4 that you're producing more than what the DFC expects in this, trajectory towards the DFC, where the 123% instead of 100% on that. And so if you realize we got 60,000 acre feet permitted that hasn't even begun to produce, being alarm bells should be going off. So if we add those to those tables and the recommendations are written there, add some of that information to those tables, then it becomes very evident. And that's the management goal, number 5.2.1 on this hydrological surface water interaction study. So that study was going to be shared with the board and the public last month, and it was tabled. We'd like to hear that information. And it's very relevant to the permit that was contested, the Rambo permit. And so the public needs to hear that information. It's going to get, if there's a contested case hearing, it's going to come up in discovery. So at some point, you got to make it public. Whether you have a public hearing or a contested case, let's get it out there. Let's get that information going about surface water, groundwater interaction. And Mr. Box with Environmental Stewardship had emailed right before the meeting comments to that effect also. That'll be shared with you later. Let me conclude with saying that I really support the socioeconomic impact study proposal from LRB. Again, it's also very comprehensive. It fulfills what SAWDF attempted to do in the last DFC planning process. We took a junior stab at it. How many wells are going to be impacted? What's it going to do to ranching operations? What's it going to do to property values? What is it going to cost to just physically lower the pumps or refill as well? We took a very junior stab at it. This proposal, especially with their use of stakeholder groups to validate the data that they're coming up with, that's primo. This is a wonderful study. It's costly, but it's costly only this round. The cost is to develop this because nobody's done it. But once it's developed, you have a template, a framework that you can use again each joint planning session, and you can share with other GCDs to mitigate, to maybe recoup some of that cost in the future. So from SAWDF's point, because it's not our money, it's well worth the investment by the district in that impact study. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to provide public comments at this time? All right. Thank you. We'll move on then to agenda item 3, the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are routine. Will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion unless requested by a board director. Is there anyone that would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? All right, looks like we're all good there then. Okay, we have a motion to accept the consent agenda from Director Smith and a second from Director Phillips. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Agenda item 4, regular agenda. Announcements. I do not have any announcements today. Anybody else? All right, then we'll move on to 4B. Discussion, consideration, possible action on hearing examiner for Rambo Materials contested permit application.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Moore.
So at the last meeting, we were tasked with finding
Can you
a,
turn the microphone towards you?
yes, I don't want to have a mishap like general manager. So we were tasked with finding a hearings examiner for the preliminary hearing and what might continue to a hearing on the merits for the Rambo Materials contested case. And we reached out to several judges that have served in this capacity in other GCDs. And the one that has availability, like with his docket, to take this on in the short term is Judge Stephen Abels. He's a visiting judge in Kerr County. And his rate is $650 a day. And, he charges essentially the regular travel costs authorized by the state of Texas. And so, he has also done this in the same role with Gonzales County, GCD, or Underground Water Conservation District. And I would ask, for basically authority for Jim Totten to finalize the paperwork to get Judge Abel's retained. That would be my recommendation and ask for a motion. Second.
Your motion, to, allow District Office to finalize the paperwork and the contract with a, Judge
Stephen
Stevens
Abels.
Abel. And
Abels, ABLES.
Do you have any proposed dates?
No, not yet. Yeah, he was his secretary or court clerk indicated he could take this on this fall. Like September, the earliest we'd see something, scheduling dates.
I had a motion by Director Semang and a second by Director Rogers. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Regular agenda item 4C, presentation by Ellery Water on the desired future conditions monitoring well draft report. Legal being Mr. Alan Stanley.
Good evening, board and board members. Today I want to re-present, as I presented this about 6 months ago. I proposed monitoring program. This is in draft form right now. A couple of things. One, we didn't have the three-dimensional model done at the time. I needed the three-dimensional model to confirm the problems that fix the proposed monitoring. But then I wanted to hear some comments and feedback. So anyway, this is still in draft form. Again, my name is Alan Standen, Hillary, and the senior one. So,
Is that the right one?
yes,
Okay.
Yeah, just need to share it. It's not being shared.
It's opening on the wrong screen.
Alan, can I ask you a quick question?
yes,
Everywhere it says error reference source not found, that's waiting to plug in the 3D. Because that appears throughout the.
yeah, I guess, yeah, yeah, I mean, and again, last night, we got that information done, so now I can answer some of the questions. that were- So the importance of a monitoring program, it's probably one of the most important functions of a groundwater district. And it's, it helps you with the VFCs, with mitigation, water fluctuation, water situations that you may have within the district. The So, the program, one of the things when you consider groundwater monitoring program, if you're going to consider access to wells, we ideally would have historical water level and chemistry data. You need to know the screen intervals or production intervals. You have to have the well ideally fully penetrate the aquifer, so sometimes you have wells that partially penetrate. And ideally, is that fully penetrate, so you get mainly longevity for your water treatment well, but also more representative water level. They have good representation of confined and unconfined conditions. Confined. You have to have a good representation of the outcrop and the subsurface, and then ideally, you have 3 or more monitor wells in an area, so you can determine the groundwater gradient and also the groundwater flow direction.
Excuse me, but Jim, the slides aren't updating. We're still on the title slide. Maybe it's me, maybe it's my computer here.
So one of, my tasks, I had an objective look at your existing monitoring program, which is 118 wells. And the goal is to kind of look at those wells, look at the distribution, look at the wells are completed, and determine which of these wells to move forward as part of your DFC program. Anyway, we're going. The 118 wells, I selected 89 of your wells, existing monitor wells that met the minimum requirements for the your BFC monitoring feature. The 29 elected, you can monitor as needed.
There you go, it's working. At least the slides did change on my side.
That screen was moving, but the screen back there was not, so. It's 2-inch drop now.
This is the figure showing your existing as of the monitor program of 118 wells, different colors represent different aquifers. Again, there's 118. You notice there's large areas with no monitor wells. Next slide. So the 118, of course, this is an area up in northern Lee County that has been an area of concern. You have a lot of monitor wells in this area. Some of these wells, there wasn't enough information to support using that as a monitor well, or there was done redundancy since you have a lot of monitor wells already in the area. So I think I limited it, I think 112 of those wells. But
They're moving. There's a little bit of lag, but it's moving.
there it is. I should have my glasses on. I don't see. So, to do this, I went through and compiled a TDR database, actually, Wally helped me do that. 3,399 wells, and then of course, Texas Water Development Board database. In those databases, we built all the well attributes, screenables, water chemistry, if it was available for the Texas Water Development Board, pump depth, well diameter, all these different variables. One of the things I want to point on this list when you're looking at building a monitoring system is that you want to pick monitor wells that have a relatively thick saturated thickness. So you have to look at longevity well. For instance, say you had a well that's 200 feet, and your water level is 180 feet. That when you're having water level declines, that's probably not a good choice. So you got to consider well depth, the depth of the pump, if it's fully penetrating the aquifer, which we now know with our 3D model. And then the well, again, a good well representation of the then you got to consider the geographic distribution. You don't want to have your monitor wells all kind of a linear fashion. You want to spread them out in a pattern that you can determine groundwater flow directions and the results of contamination possibly. Next slide. So the bottom line, the underlying score that's been resolved so that, sorry, Jim. We had, no, that's okay. So this is a geographic representation of all those wells, 5,000 wells that I had these huge data sets and screened them and sorted them to pick ultimately the best wells. And then when I had a cluster of wells in an area, I would go individually through those wells and pick the wells I thought were the best for that area. There's no guarantee that these wells are available. Next slide.
Is that page 12 of 26 in
Board packet.
So these next figures are just showing what monitor wells were from. What existing monitor wells are well and the proposed monitor wells for each aquifer. I'm not gonna spend any time on this, these are in your packet. So advance, and then we're gonna go through all 7 aquifers. And I can't read the screen. with number.
You gotta go back for an eye exam.
I'm sorry.
Did you all go through the formation or did you?
Each, no, just go to the very test of one of that group and then keep going there. This is the proposed monitor well system. It's, I think it's 152 wells. And, in retrospect, there may be a few of these. You brought down as needed, but, there's in the existing, district's database, there's 35 wells that I've included in this data set that don't have screen information or some don't even have well depth. They're in all crops, so it's probably fine. But anyway, there's some of these wells that are in the Lost Pines district data that need to be reinvestigated to see if we can fill in the data. So we're using the 3-dimensional model. Went through this 152 wells, so 652 wells. There was 18 wells that were in the Lost Pines database, and then there was 17 wells in the TDR database that had the wrong aquifer. I assigned aquifers based on kind of visualizing what the 3-dimensional would do, and I was wrong. So we've got to correct that, and that's so all your figures just went through. We have to redo and modify them. They're generally going to be about the same. So these are my recommendations. This is kind of subjective. These are my opinions. So the 61 new monitor wells are proposing from our Texas Water Development Board. As well to the development. The TDLR are 57. They all have screenables. They all have well depth, they pump depth information. They're actually pretty good data. So we don't know, as I said before, we don't know if we got permission to use these monitor wells. And so the district to investigate that and find out if the landowners are willing to dedicate their wells to the monitor. I don't, part of my deliverable was not the owner's address or phone number. So that's a step. And then obviously that's a lot of wells and new wells to add to the system. So I'm proposing kind of doing this over a 3-year period. And the prioritization of that is kind of up to the wood. Got some recommendation on the slide based on use, volume pumped, and filling gaps or whatever needed. Now, this is one of the ideas I had. So I was going to take your wells, your Sinsboro and Carrizo wells, which are your biggest producers and most active wells, make those a priority year 1, year 2, second. So also, as was mentioned earlier, given that we needed to set up a monitoring well system for Colorado River moving. There's 350 wells in our TDR database. TDR. Some of these wells are being completed that moving, but also completed the underlying. And so we would probably select wells that are distinctly completed with the new Lumium for monitoring. I know there's been a number of suggestions on some wells to use. If we can't find wells to use, these are very easily drilled up. Infill, whatever data. But I'm recommending 3 or 4 wells monitoring program. And I think it's the number 2. So the last meeting I attended was I think the board approved the water new rules. 17, the water quality. But there's nothing in that. So how you go about implementing, starting water quality program. Right now, based on those proposed 152 wells in the future database, only 12 of those wells have water temperature within 2,000. A lot of homes to fill. So I'm recommending that we start a program to monitor those. So when you're looking at water quality data, you're looking at potential contamination, you've got to have a series of water quality measurements to even tell there's a change in the trend. And a trend, next slide, only stay there, I'm saying. So when you look at contamination, you look at anthropogenic contamination or natural contamination. And natural, some of the natural contamination you can have in this district. You can have uranium, you're probably some oils, if you think it's bad, but those are probably the natural ones. Like investigate the feeling where you are with the district. So groundwater formations, groundwater formations sometimes have different geochemical signatures. And that's based on lithology, and secondary minerals in the formation. And so when you're doing your geochemistry, you have to measure anions like iron, manganese, and manganese, and anions like chloride and sulfate. But also there'd be selected metals, as I mentioned before, for uranium or arsenic, pH, and then there's some meetings I attended that talking about temperature. So when you have this chemistry put together and you have areas that you think are possibly impacted by groundwater contamination, you can use these these formations have geochemical signatures. You can get images from those changes in your existing chemistry from past chemistry. So, as I say, you need three geochemical measurements to do any kind of analysis. And you also need a sampling total. Our monitoring program, this is my opinion. I think from my perspective, it's best to measure water levels when they're stabilized during extremes. In this case, minimal groundwater pumping would be like January, February. And then your summer pumping, your aquifers are more stressed would be probably August. So I'd recommend you do that, whatever you works out, but I think you should take 2 measurements a year.
Monitoring of VOCs should occur twice a year during January, February, and August and September.
That was just somebody. Oh, yeah, somebody online that wasn't muted. Okay. No.
They agreed with you.
The other thing about water level measurements is you want to get a snapshot in time, get an idea of an area. If you're measuring water levels over a 3-4 month period of a certain geographic area, that really doesn't do you good. You need to get a snapshot. In other words, within a month or so, you got a geographic area, get those water levels in a very short period of time. So it's representative of that period of time. And ultimately, all these water levels and water quality will be, be useful to build. I understand seasonal fluctuations in demand. My last one is, and I think Jim's already given. I guess the bill would have. Measuring. Defining the water level measurement outside the district, outside the model there. Major effect.
And just to recap, this effort was a task that the board gave to LRE back in about February of 22. I believe, when you first got on board.
That was about right, yes. And then,
And this was one of the tasks, I believe it was like task 5 or so. You know, this was one of the original tasks.
original tax,
When we first joined this.
Ellen,
Yes.
I've got a question. Okay. You were talking quite a bit about the geochemistry of the water. Okay, as the water quality. I guess this is more a definitional thing, but depending upon where you are, you're going to find different things, heavy metals, uranium, things like this. But these are naturally occurring in the sense that it's coming from the geology in the area. Okay, how is that differentiated from, say, if there's some sort of, these things, some mining operation or fracking or putting recharges of water in there that are putting other, I'm gonna call them, and please correct me if I'm wrong, non-ambient elements in there. Okay, so you've got water quality, you got water quality. How are those gonna be differentiated on these wells? And what if you start getting something in one, I mean, you know the geology of the area, so you know you wanna test for A, B, C, and D. And over here, you wanna check for W, X, Y, Z. But what if you get other things all of a sudden that come in there? Based on the analysis, number one, how are you gonna know if you've got something in there? Number two, how are you gonna identify?
well, I mean, again, when you're talking volatiles and heavy metals and pesticides, herbicides, I mean, there's so many things to test for. I'm proposing kind of a basic analysis and be selective, but if there's some other contamination outside of what we select, we're not gonna know unless somebody else measures that. Well, yeah. We suspect that, we're not gonna be able to cover everything in every area.
Right, that was my point.
Yeah, I mean, we have a baseline to start from, and we could tell if our cation or anion ratios change, or, I was saying 10-20% change would be something realistic, because you got seasonal changes in chemistry sometimes. So we don't have an idea what those are right now. We don't have really an idea. And when you get to the eastern part, like Lee County and all, as you move east, you're moving into a geothermal zone, you're also moving more oil and gas. You've got, you know, as I say, uranium potential here. Again, on certain areas, you get lignite mines. Lignite mines have rare earth elements, they have all kinds of stuff in it, right? You know, and so you've got all kinds, and again, that's why geographically, to take kind of a sit down and really put some thought about what do we need to measure? And then kind of, I guess I didn't say that, kind of put this chemical plan together over 5 years, because it's gonna take some time, it's gonna take some investment.
Okay, so this is gonna be an evolving thing
Oh, yeah.
as you're going through.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, I'm sorry,
Alan,
yes.
what kind of laboratory will it take to do this kind of assessment?
Well, LCRA has a lab that we used to that. There's, I'm actually doing a lot of geochemistry right now for mining. And so there's
So you thought we just contracted out to
there's
somebody?
contract now.
And tell me if I'm wrong, aren't those water samples somewhat time sensitive? Once you take them, they have to get
They
tested.
can be, if they're volatiles and things like that, or certain metals, yes, they can be. So that's why I said you need to set up sampling. It's gonna take, you know, a little bit more planning than we have right now. This is what we do. And again, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's something that's feasible in Bastrop and Lee County to find somebody to contract it out to.
Oh, yeah.
Get stuff there in a timely manner and.
Yeah, well, timely manner has always been a good question. I'm taking 2 months to get my samples right now for this project I'm working on. It's taking 2 months to get chemistry, but that's not a problem for you.
No, I just mean getting the water to them.
Yeah, in order to. That's,
That's pretty
you have-
labor
you
intensive.
have, That is, and that's what, us as a or a contractor with you would probably take care of. Yes, sir.
Yeah, some of those chemical analyses are really expensive.
Yes, they are.
So you explored like indicators that are relatively inexpensive, and if they show up, then you can go dive in for more detailed analyses. For example, I know the Edwards Aquifer, one of the things they look for is coffee.
Yeah, because you're looking for, pharmaceuticals and,
Right.
yeah, certainly look at coffee or,
Or there are
female hormones. or
other
whatever.
indicators.
Yeah, other indicators in the chemistry. We don't want to do that. That's super expensive, so,
Coffee.
well, coffee analysis. But I'm just saying that, I mean, that takes certain very specialized equipment to do that. But, I mean, we've got stuff in ground. I mean, in the future, if there's, you gotta consider all your different sources of contamination. We gotta start and build a framework first. So cost. So I'm discussing this with Vince before. Some of these samples may bring you a couple to $300. Yeah, per sample. And if you do, like, for me, if you do only gas, you have to. So, and you gotta look at ratios and stuff like that. Once we get those analyses, we can do the analysis. So some of these, if you get more of the very specialized analysis, they can run into $1,000+ dollars. Ultimate goal of this project is to provide the district with a way to address Rule 17, that's protecting the groundwater quality of the district. Right now, we don't have any method to do.
Are there ways to alleviate that if you can identify it, if you have?
Well, we would know if it came down to a contamination issue, if we could identify the source. That would partially eliminate that issue, but I mean, as for remediation, no, I mean, this would not be, but it was to let us know we have an issue.
What goal is what I get?
What goal?
Is to maintain groundwater quality and make sure it's not deteriorating due to pumping or some source of, somebody's contaminating the groundwater.
Or just pumping low, we could have salinity increases.
Sure.
And plus some things could be reported to TCEQ. We aren't necessarily going to be the ones fighting that fight.
Yeah, if it's surface water, right, but at least we know of a change or that that a change is occurring. That's why we need to get a baseline. And
I
then,
understand the
and-
baseline.
and then we would know if there's change. The goal is to maintain the water quality and not have it deteriorate because of pumping or contamination.
Now, for example, if you start pumping lower and lower and the water gets more dissolved solids, more saline, then you might have to slow down the pumping in that particular area. Because the deeper you go, the worse it's going to get. So that's one of the most common things.
The other, if you have well fields that are pumping a lot of water, you could depressurize that formation and you could flow coming from underneath formations with fairly poor water quality into your pumping formation. So, I mean, there's different pumping scenarios, there's different damage scenarios.
So there are ways to mediate.
Yeah, but
Some of the issues.
we don't want to go there. We don't want to go there.
And not to step on Alan's toes here, but we have an example with the client out in West Texas where they had some oil and gas contamination flowing wells to land surface. And we knew what the present day water chemistry was in the aquifer there. It was 20 to 30,000 TDS. But the district didn't have historic measurements for this area to compare it to prove that there was contamination from these wells within the aquifer system. We scrubbed all the literature, we scrubbed oil and gas databases. We finally found one data point from the 1950s out there that we could use as that baseline measurement point, but that was $20,000 later of research to trying to figure out if we could find that needle in the haystack to prove that there had been a deterioration of water chemistry from some of these source aquifers into the local aquifer system there. So if they had implemented a plan like this 30 years ago, we'd have had that baseline data to compare and contrast to. So that's just one example that's recently come up here, to where having that baseline, that background data was extremely important for this one client to help prove a point that there was some contamination from these produced water zones into their aquifer system.
It's kind of a philosophy, being proactive or reactive. You want to be proactive.
This is a long term,
Thank you.
way long term.
Yes, ma'am.
Alan, on your recommendation for, Colorado River alluvium monitoring program, you're recommending 4 wells, and when I look at the map, we just got miles and miles and miles of Colorado River running through the district. How would you decide where to locate those 4 wells? Is
Well,
that?
that's why I just want the stakeholders involved. And also, when we get limited, one of those wells could probably go completed into the combination well. We just want to want wells that represent, you know. So, we could narrow that way down. But how do we go from 100 to 4? That's both stakeholders.
Landowners? You say stakeholders?
Yeah, landowners, yeah. But also you got environmental groups that are interested in this. like-
You have a lot of miles of river there.
You do, I mean, so I say start with 4, didn't say end.
It's- And so just to sum up your recommendation, you are recommending at least 3 data points within a 5-year period.
Yes, for each well.
For each well.
Went up to water quality monitoring, which I recommend you do for all your DFC wells.
Yeah.
Get a good geographic distribution.
It's just a number. So three data points in 5-year period.
Yes, okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Stanton? Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda, number 4D. Presentation by Ellery Water regarding recent desired future conditions well monitoring. I think is Vince, I think you're gonna start us off and then you're gonna pass the baton over to Wally. So you're starting us off, Vince?
I think I'm gonna take care of the whole thing
Okay.
tonight, actually. Well, he's gonna be my wingman over there.
Oh, all right.
That's comes back to you. So what we have here, this is just the transmittal letter that
One
explains.
second. It's not being shared. You're still sharing the other presentation. So to recap on this, this was a task that was fairly recently given to LRE to monitor and meter our DFC wells for this cycle. So that started in the spring, this spring.
That is
That's
correct.
correct, Vince?
Yeah, and just to introduce myself to the board. This time here, my name is Vince Claus, hydrogeologist, licensed professional geologist here with the state of Texas, and project manager at Ellery Water, and just picking up where we left off there. It was January 17th at that board meeting when the board authorized this work to commence. And what we did is we expanded the existing hydrogeology services contract that Ellery Water had with Lost Pines GCD there to include well monitoring services. And so it was Wally, who's standing over here in the back corner, navigating the screen for me, so politely, thank you. Who actually had the pleasure of going out with Jim over 2 different days in the field there. So this was April 23rd and then again on April 25th, where they were able to go out and measure 12 wells one day, 13 wells one day. But I understand from Jim, these are some of the more difficult wells. I think Wally at one point told me that he needs a machete next time he goes out to one of these wells. And so I know that the goal here early on was to get us acquainted with the Lost Pines, kind of water level collection processes, understand access to some of these more difficult wells. And so that was accomplished in this first round here where we collected water level measurements on the 25 different well sites there over that April 23rd and April 25th date. So going back to Alan's recommendation of getting a snapshot in time, we were able to get a really good snapshot in that late April window there by being able to make these water level sampling events within close proximity to one another there based on those calendar dates of only being separate by 3 days there. So with this work, one thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we were able to make this somewhat replicatable for anyone else coming in behind us doing similar work. So as part of this, one of the things that we said we would do for the board is develop some sort of template, some sort of document that becomes a living document. And what we're looking at right here is just an export from a living Excel document that we plan to continue to use throughout this. This is the water level sampling information for those 25 wells that were sampled. But what this actually ties back to is an Excel document with different pages for each water level or each well that we measured a water level on. And as we update that with time, this table here will also be updated with those most recent sampling events. So it's a way just where we're able to keep track of what we're doing in a way that's systematic. It's something that we can easily back up and provide to the district, and something that the district can then provide anyone else in a very easily transferable format, which is an Excel spreadsheet, which I believe most of us have access to these days on our computers. What we also did as part of this is we developed what we're kind of calling our Lost Pines well report. For each well, we developed this one-page document here that has the Lost Pines well ID, any other well information that we have related to the state well number, the well name, the location. We have lat long coordinates here. We have aquifer well depth. We have the measurement point stick up. And then we also have comments about whether or not or how to access those wells. Any information that we believe may be pertinent for someone else down the road, we made sure that that was included in this document. And then as you see here, we have some placeholders to add our measurements. And so this is something that will also continue to evolve with time here. The more measurements that we put here, the longer this table will be built out with additional information. We'll have who was reporting measurements on what days and what those water levels were. And Jim, if you don't mind just scrolling down through a couple of these here.
And one thing I want to point out, Jim, is just be mindful, some of these entries may have some private sensitive data. So I know folks have noticed there's some of these have like gate codes. So we may want to skip.
Well, we'll just stop on this one then.
Yeah, let's just stop and just on this one.
Did not see that was included in
Yeah,
this,
some of
so.
these, there's some private sensitive data that we don't want to particularly share. We cannot share because it's private and sensitive.
And so that's it for this specific presentation here today. We did have this sampling event. It did take place here in April. We are putting together these kind of living working documents that will make this to where down the road someone else can easily take over. We're making sure that this data is being stored in multiple places. It's something that anyone can get their hands on and easily understand. It's something that I've already provided to Post Oak Savannah once here. They were looking for recent water level measurements. I was able to just quickly send them our Excel spreadsheet here. I got a thanks in response there from their consultant. So it's just making sure that we're able to easily transfer and replicate these measurement events that we're doing here.
A couple of things I wanted to highlight was that there's definitely, so far, there's a gap between what Mr. Allen Standen presented and what you measured. So I would expect that in this next cycle, we'll be picking up a whole lot more wells that, because Allen's report was a draft and it still needs to be validated with the 3D model. We did not hit all of those wells that Mr. Standen had highlighted. So this next cycle, we'll be picking those up and we'll need to address that gap and add a lot more wells this next coming cycle. And just to highlight that, we did allocate, I think, about $12,000 for this effort, and we only spent $4,000. So in terms of cost and expense, we came well under our projected expense. But again, we did have a gap in terms of what we need to monitor. For the next cycle, I would expect that our expenses will go up as will the number of wells.
President Grant, we had previously just done the Carrizo, a lot of the Carrizo monitoring up in northern Lee County. We had another cycle that was planned about a month and a half after this particular trip. So at the time that we were out in the field, it would have been duplicative to go back out and hit those North Lee. So a lot of the North Lee County wells, things like that were not included in this trip. It was really just focusing on the other DFC wells that we knew needed to stay in the process. And then we'll loop in the new wells from, Allen's report in the fall.
The next, in the fall. Yep. Thank you.
And just to piggyback off that, that is correct. I believe after tonight's meeting here, that number is gonna go up a little bit, but some of that 4,000 was also used to develop some of the framework that we see right here. So some of that will be stripped away on future efforts, but as you pointed out, we came in well below that initial estimate. And so this was 25 wells. It's something that each time we visit one of these wells, things will go a little bit or move a little bit faster as well. And I know Jim was kind of showing Wally, you know, some of the tips and tricks there. So next time, you know, some of those small 5-10 minute type interjections that were taking place at some of these well sites won't necessarily be there. So it's definitely something that we'll be more efficient with time, kind of look at it as we're getting our feet wet here and we're ready to jump that first in on this next round.
Yeah, it'll take a little bit of time to get up to the 100 plus wells that Alan has identified, and I view this as a, you know, work in progress. Right.
Excuse me, the well status, is that just comparing to the reading before?
So that's whether or not the pump was on, active or static water level. So these are letting us know whether or not, or what was
Well, I
happening
mean, I
with that.
see rising and falling, is that comparing to previous reading?
So that's gonna be related to if the pump was on or if we got there right when the pump had turned off. So if we notice that the water level would have to be rising or if it was falling.
Thanks, Wally.
Any other questions on this agenda item?
And then y'all have access through the shared drive to the old DFC water well levels, right?
I believe so.
So-
That's the Excel
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
so we can start taking those out of the old DB Stevens format, putting them into your new system, right?
We can do that, yes, sir.
Okay. Then, I guess you're on the next agenda, right? So so we'll move on to a regular agenda item 4E, which is a presentation by Groundwater regarding the updated well database project. This project was a recent project from 2 to 3 months ago or so, roughly, to update and clean up our well database, validate the aquifers and other settings, and so this is an update as to where we are at on that. Good thoughts.
That is correct. And just to reiterate, this was task 9. It was approved about 3 months ago when we were over there in Bastrop at the Civic Center. What we were calling this, and I think is probably the proper name for this task still is, it was the Registered Well Database Review. If you don't mind going to the next slide here. It's just going to outline what some of those initial early goals were, just here as a recap. The early big piece of this was to review the Registered Well Database to assess its completeness. One of the things that we learned while developing the 3-dimensional model and going to assign aquifers is we were missing some pertinent information, such as well construction information, more specifically that well screen interval. We had well depths on most of the wells within the database. And I would say we'll get to that in a slide here, but around 90% of the wells actually had a well depth associated with them, which we were able to use. But where we found that was somewhat problematic in that approach is as we were assigning aquifer codes to the Simsboro, most of those wells were drilled into the Hooper 50 to 100 feet. And the way we were using our methodology, those were actually accidentally being assigned Hooper wells because we were just going off that well depth instead of that well screen interval. So what we learned early on through the aquifer assignments related to the 3D model work is, hey, with a little bit more information, we can improve upon how we're assigning the aquifer codes. Also, while digging through the database, we noticed there was some other information that was missing, some information that was inconsistent. So I know we brought that to the board's attention at one point in time. We brought it to the board's attention that we believe we can improve upon some of this. So the next step of all this was to fill in some missing information that we believe was out there and available within those state managed databases. When I refer to a state managed database, there's two of them that we like to go to. One is the Texas Water Development Board Groundwater Database. This has a lot of information on older, more historic wells that were once part of an old report that the Texas Water Development Board worked on, or one of their subcontractors worked on for them at one point in time. And then we have the submitted drillers report database that's maintained by TDLR, which is the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. All the wells drilled since 2003 across the state of Texas are required to be entered into this database. Water well drillers are registered with the state of Texas, and one of those requirements for any newly drilled well is for that well to make it into this database. So over the last 20 years here, we have complete coverage of Lee and Bastrop County in terms of all those newly drilled wells. And so between those two databases, we were able to scrub information from those databases, cross-reference with the Lost Pines GCD database, and then ultimately develop and provide Lost Pines GCD with an updated well database. And then still working on some of the loose ends here, which is the summary report, missing data from the original database, data added and modified by LRE, those methods that we use to bring all this data and information together. The updated well aquifer assignments, nearly complete with that. The one thing that we're going back and double checking is all those screen intervals. We're making sure that where we have screen intervals, we're really understanding where those are completed. Are they dual completed across two aquifer systems? Sometimes you get 2 and 3 and 4 screens in one well. We have to go check each one of those screens individually. So it's taking a little bit longer than we anticipated, but it's something we're nearly finished with here. And then also, we're going to provide you with some recommendations for future database improvements. And I believe there's just 2 of them, and we'll cover those on the last slide here today. So methodology, I just mentioned we have access to these state managed databases. On the right side of the screen here is an actual example of what a state well report looks like out of the TDLR submitted drillers report database. And so first we looked at the Lost Pines database. We assessed that database for completeness. So lat long, location information, well name, well IDs, well use type, well construction, pump setting. And then we're able to use these state managed databases, cross-reference locations, and then pull in pertinent well construction information. That's really what we're going after here. We're going after well depths, well screen intervals, but also the other thing that we wanted to do here is also make sure that we were correlating all these state well database wells with the Lost Pines GCD database. So I have a couple things highlighted on this one page here. You can see that well construction information here. We have a 4-inch well that was mill slotted from 340 to, I believe that's 380. Maybe I need some glasses too, Alan. And then we also have a pump depth setting on this one at 140. We know this is a domestic well, and then we have that state ID number that's on the top of the page here. Slide, please, sir. So what we were able to do here is we were able to cross-reference the Lost Pines database, which has 3,473 wells in it, or at least it did when we pulled this information 3 months ago, with the groundwater database and the submitted drillers report database. So in the groundwater database, there's 1,283 wells across Lee and Bastrop County. In the submitted drillers report database, there's 3,540 across Lee and Bastrop County. From those two databases, we then found 132 matches in the groundwater database, 2,173 matches in that submitted drillers report database. What that resulted in was 2,305 matched well records between the two, but ultimately 2,207 unique wells. There were some wells where we found a match in the groundwater database, and we also found a match in the submitted well drillers report database. But ultimately, out of the district's 3,473, we found a match in one of these state databases for 2,207 wells. What that means is we were able to update a lot of missing information, specifically well screen information. Next slide, please. So this is kind of that results page that shows kind of before and after. On the left side, this is the information that was missing across wells, screen intervals missing across all wells, pump depths missing across nearly 3,300, 700, and 3,374 wells. We're missing elevation on 1,191 wells, drilling dates, well depths, owner info. That's what we're seeing on the left side. That's all the information that's missing. And that's not unique to Lost Pines. This happens with every GCD. You're dealing with incomplete information when you're getting wells registered. A lot of times it's just because that information is unknown by the well owner. And so these things are very consistent with what we've seen elsewhere across the state. Very, very similar numbers in terms of what that really looks like. Now, on the right side of the screen, this is those updated data counts that we were able to add value to the district's database with. So out of the 2,207 wells we identified, out of 2,042 of those, we were able to update a screen interval on. So out of 2,042 wells out of the district's 3,473 now have a screen interval associated with them. So, you know, about 2/3 of the wells now, we understand where those wells are screened and completed. And then I'm just going to ramble off the next couple here. Pump depth, nearly 2,000 wells. Elevation added to 650 wells. Drilling dates to 63 wells. Added well depths to another 47. And well owner information to another 29. And so we were able to do all this by spatially referencing the district's existing database with these state managed databases. We were looking for wells that were within close proximity of one another. So we used a 20-foot buffer. Then we looked at those well attributes and we made sure we had owner matches, our drill date matches, to where we felt confident that, hey, these wells are nearly in an identical location to one another. We have the exact same landowner. We have a drill date that's the same too. These are the same one. We were looking for that type of information to make sure what we were doing was something that is replicatable. It's also defensible. And that's what we're really excited about at the end of the day here is we were ultimately able to add quite a bit of value to the district's database through this service here. And then next slide, Jim. And then we also went ahead and we added a couple other key pieces of information here. We actually realized that some of the wells were missing elevation data. Some of the other wells that did have elevation data may have been pulled directly from a well report or were driller reported. So what we did is we made sure we applied a DM elevation value across the board to every well within the district's database. And then what we also did is anywhere where we had aquifer data, such as an estimated well yield or pump test data from one of these driller reports, we brought that into its own unique field. And then also all the well construction information. So borehole diameter, casing diameter, that was also brought into the database kind of as a value-added service. It's something that the district isn't currently collecting, but it's something that we now have access to. And then, of course, updated aquifer classifications.
DEM.
Oh, my apologies. Digital elevation model. So this is, my apologies. This is something that is generated based on satellite imagery or satellite technologies. They're sending radars down, bouncing it off the ground and creating an elevation model that we like to use to kind of come up with a uniform way of evaluating elevation across a large landscape.
Vince, you might have asked one.
Yes, sir.
The 2009 pump test data. I see a lot of driller reports that come in with partial pump test data. So I'm curious, you actually found 2009 full pump test?
So that 2009 is an either or. It's either an estimated yield or a pump. So a lot of those are just going to be estimated yields, 50 gallons per minute, 75 gallons per minute, 3,000 gallons per minute.
Because I've seen a lot where it's pumped at this amount for this volume, and then they don't report the drawdown.
Right.
So I was curious. I was like, maybe I've had bad luck, so
No, you're spot on there. So there's three components. There's the pump rate, the drawdown, and the time.
Yeah.
Usually we're getting that pump rate, that estimated yield. And very rarely do we get those other two pieces of the puzzle there. Now, currently, the way the HAF database is structured, this information, there's a comments field. We're going to format this in a way to where this just plugs into the comments field in a way that's easily able to be readable by anyone that is looking at the comments field. It's something we've done previously with another GCD where we provide Excel tables to HAF and we tell them exactly what fields these different attributes are supposed to go into, and they're able to pretty easily and quickly plug this information in.
Hey, Jim, when drillers turn in their reports to the district, do they have to include the screen intervals?
you typically included, yes, ma'am.
But sometimes, I mean, they're,
Well, so
what do they have to report back to you?
what they turn into us is the same report they turn into the state, which will For anything from 2003, we'll include the screened interval. But anything prior to 2003,
I know mine doesn't have the screen.
Yeah.
anymore, so.
so, and our discussion of well downhole cameras, we'll get to that, but, yeah, basically anything from 2003, we should have the screened interval. As long as they reported it accurately.
That's always the catch there, as long as they reported it accurately. And that's one of the things that Wally is struggled with for us on these types of exercises, because usually the drillers, they just string text everything into one field, and you have to parse out screen intervals. Sometimes things are backwards. Sometimes there's a typo where it says from 36 feet to 920 feet. You're like, well, that doesn't seem right, but they changed their borehole from 8-inch down to 4-inch at 360 feet. You're like, oh, they missed the 0 on the 36. So there's some magic that takes place behind the scenes here to make this work. And if you don't mind going to the next slide.
Well, we had GPS coordinates for wells that were in Arkansas.
Oh, yeah, that's another fun one to deal with there. So remaining task here, we're just kind of tidying up on some of these aquifer classifications. So doing that final QA check, finalizing these database tables, and providing those associated instructions for HAF in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here through some of these database updates. And then, of course, then finalizing the tech memo that characterizes all this work that we just completed here. Now, recommendations. There's 355 wells in the district's database currently with unknown lat long information. I know I've spoken with you about this before. They all kind of plot in one location. It'd be nice to know where those were located, and then we could potentially improve upon the database even more with those 355. And then the last one here, we were just touching on that all these well reports, they do get reported to the state. Jim's also given them. I know sometimes there's disconnect in terms of what gets turned over to the district, what gets reported to the state. So just performing an annual review, what we could quickly, easily do is look at all the wells drilled in, say, 2024. There's going to be 200 and something wells. Just cross-reference those quickly to make sure they made it into the district's database. So just 2 quick and easy recommendations here at the end of the day.
When will the information be ready to give to HAF?
Probably with the conference next week, we're probably looking 2 to 3 weeks out, where we're probably about 2 weeks out in terms of getting to that point. So with the conference next week, I think it'd be safe to say about 3 weeks from now.
Sometime September, early September.
End of this month, early September.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, next up is a presentation by Wellington. Possible action regarding remote well monitoring proposal. Mr. Dunning is online. I see that he's turned on his video. Welcome, Mr. Dunning. I believe you're up in the upper Midwest. Is that
Yes,
correct?
good evening. Good evening. Yes, I wish I could be with you today, but I'm dialing in from Michigan.
105, are you sure? The 105 degrees here, I think you may not want to be here, but okay. Thank you, thank you. So, actually, the way this, a couple of months ago, I think last month, I attended the Post Oak Savannah Groundwater District Board meeting, and Mr. Dunning was there. He introduced himself to me, and that's how this all started. So, the floor is yours, Mr. Dunning.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. And am I able to share my screen?
It could be.
Should be. Okay. Let me give it a try.
Yes, we've got it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Hernandez, and nice to be here with you. At the end of my time here, this is about presenting a budget estimate for getting 8 well and tell systems that the district currently owns to get those up and running in a new network that my understanding is going to be focused on residential wells or small wells. And so that's where we'll end up. But I was asked to give a little bit of a background for folks that were not familiar with me. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a slide presentation here, and then I hope I can show you a few live things as well. So, and you have this in your packet, but let me see if I can actually make it bigger. All right, so I am with Well and Tell. We're based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but we spend a lot of time in Texas, a lot of time in California, a lot of time outside of Milwaukee. So very happy to provide some background to you. These first couple slides, you've had a great introduction to this. This is, you live this every day, every week. And LRE is obviously very deep in the work around understanding the groundwater of the district. You know, whether it's DFCs or specific issues around production leaving the counties, data is really key to that. And that's what we heard over and over again from LRE and their presentations around their work. So Well and Tell, the Well and Tell system is really designed to be to cost effectively streamline water measurements, management, and the ways that water managers work. We're working with about 20 of the groundwater conservation districts in Texas. And so we've got a fair bit of experience with the things that are really pressing on managing to DFCs and other issues. So there's really 4 parts to what we do. And I'll touch on these briefly. The first one is measuring, and this is our sensor. We'll talk about our sensor a little bit. So it's an acoustic sensor, non-invasive, and it really is a different approach to measuring levels in production wells and monitoring wells. So that's the first. The second is collecting and storing data. And in this case, we'll talk about the fact that our platform doesn't rely on our sensor. Really, any time series data from any source can be part of the water information system that we provide to our clients. The understanding part of this is that through our cloud-based dashboard and our analytics, we provide some really fundamental but powerful visualizations and understanding. We are not consultants in the sense that LRE is, but the data present themselves in very fundamental ways that provide for some quick understanding of what's happening. And then we're doing an increasing amount of reporting and alerting, and we'll touch on that as well. So first, we'll talk about our sensor, because that's what you have. You've got 8 of our sensors in the district, and that's what we're talking about, is getting those out in the field and providing data. So our sensor was designed specifically to turn production wells, submersible pump production wells, into real-time monitoring points. It is acoustic. Can you see my cursor here? Yes, okay. So the acoustic signal is created right here in this part of the sensor, travels down through the well seal into the well, travels down, finds water, comes back, and is picked up by a microphone at the end of this cable. That microphone hangs just 3 or 4 inches below that well seal. So that's all that's in the well. So a really significant reduction in the risk of contamination, the risk of mechanical problems with other types of sensors. So as I said, it's designed specifically for submersible pump wells, but it's obviously well suited for monitoring wells as well. It's acoustic, non-invasive. The installation in this well takes typically an hour or so. Oftentimes, our sensor will go in an existing vent port on the well. And if that's the case, you can see we have an integrated vent in our sensor, this adaptation as well. It's USGS tested to 1/10 of a foot accuracy. I should mention, I came to Well and Tell after 21 years with the USGS in Wisconsin, so I know very well the USGS approach to groundwater data collection, basic records. The measurement on for the sensor can be anywhere from 2 minutes, every 2 minutes, to once daily. And it can be changed remotely by us or by you as the network sponsor. The data are very secure. It's encrypted. The transmission is by radio. It's not by Wi-Fi. It's encrypted radio. And this black right here represents the antenna on the sensor, which communicates to a gateway that is either plugged into an internet router or into a cellular modem. But that transmission takes place by radio. Here's a couple of pictures in the field of our sensor. And again, the white portion is the sensor. This is just plumbing adaptations down to the well seal. Here you can see the integrated vent, and also over here, there's that integrated vent. So just some examples of what it looks like deployed. I will draw your attention to this black cable right here that comes out of the sensor. You can't see where it goes, but it actually goes to the junction box. And over here as well goes to the junction box. And that's a current transducer that goes around the power lead to the pump. So one of the unique things about the WellIntel sensor is it knows when the pump turns on, knows when the pump turns off, and therefore it can take pumping related data that's really critical to being able to understand what's happening in an individual well. And I'm going to hopefully show some of that to you live. So we talked about the communications. So this is a cloud-based system. It provides continuous real-time data. And we have three ways of getting those data from the sensor to the cloud. First is, sorry for backing up. First is this one on the left. And this is essentially what I understand we're talking about for the deployment of these 8 systems, which is volunteer domestic wells. And this is a really robust and really cost-effective way to be collecting these data, because you're essentially leveraging existing internet infrastructure. So the gateway is plugged into an internet router directly at a home or a business or a municipal supply corporation where it's within about 1,500 feet of the well. So we've got about 1,500 feet of radio distance that we can go between the sensor, the well, and this gateway. So if we can connect that way, that local telemetry, there's no additional cost, because we're essentially riding on that internet connection. We don't get into Wi-Fi. We don't get into that actual platform. We're just sending small data packets up to the cloud. And I'm not going to really talk about these others, because my understanding is that this network that we're talking about is going to take advantage of volunteer domestic wells or small pumping wells.
That certainly is the goal.
Please.
That's the goal. The goal is to try to find 8 locations where we do have local internet.
That's my understanding. Yes. Was that Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so my understanding is that the goal here is to find those local volunteer residential or small farm wells or municipal system wells and build this network of 8 systems around that. So I'm going to take you to the platform here in just a moment. And so the network manager, that is going to be, Jim or Mr. Totten, or it's going to be LRE that are going to use these data. And we have, as I said, some pretty useful visualizations, a first look at data. And that's really important for just the day-to-day operations. LRE, of course, can do some of this really sophisticated stuff that they're doing with the modeling. But something that's also very useful is that in addition to this network view, which is our analytics dashboard, we have an individual dashboard that's provided to, or the district will provide if they want to the folks who are actually volunteering their wells. So those folks, if it's a residential well, that residential owner will be able to see what's happening in their well, but only their well. And they can set alerts around that and actually see the activity in that well that they've never seen before. So that's a real nice benefit. And in some ways for our districts, it's been a real selling point for them to be getting volunteers interested in volunteering their well. So at this point, with your okay, I'm going to take you quickly to the dashboard. This is our analytics dashboard. This is live. It's live. And I'm showing you one of our networks in Texas. This happens to be with Edwards Aquifer Authority. No longer active, but it was one that we had working with them. And I'm going to show you a particular well, this FRP house well. And just on this landing page, you get a lot of information around this well, some history, just as average monthly averages. But over time, you can see over the period of record things that are happening there. Plus, you get information about that particular sensor, location, elevation, last communications, things like that. This particular sensor has collected over almost 80,000 records over the life of its service. But under the analytics, which I say, we have this range of visualizations that are really, really helpful. And I'm just going to go to the levels tab under this, and I'm showing you a quick view of one well, that FRP house well. And the reason I like to show this is because if anyone has concerns about collecting data from a pumping well, and I think there was a comment earlier about those well records, needing to know if the well is pumping or if the well is recovering, that's important for that measurement. Here's what the data look like when you're actually collecting the pumping data. And this is over about a 2-week period. And so the first thing to notice here is that the static or the non-pumping level is very clear. And in this case, that saturated thickness has increased about 10 feet over this two-week period. So even though there's a lot of pumping in this well, you can see very clearly what the trends are here. So I'm just, yes? Was that a question?
No.
Nope. Okay. So I was just emphasizing that using pumping wells for understanding levels within your network is very valid in this case. This demonstrates that, I think. The other thing I like to show here, or the second thing is these actual pumping records. And if you remember, I mentioned that we have a current transducer that goes around the power lead to the pump. And so for each of these pumping events, these are all pretty identical. We can see that you won't be able to read these, but for each of these measurement points, each dot is a measurement point. There's the name of the well, there's a timestamp, there's the value of the level, and it's labeled as, it has a label, and this label is a timed reading. This is a timed reading. They're an hour apart, so every hour there's a timed reading. This is a timed reading. This one is labeled pump start, and that's because a current started going through that to the wire to the pump. The sensor sensed that and took a reading and labeled it pump start. After about a minute, the pump stopped. It takes another reading. It's labeled pump stop. And it knows after that to take a series of readings that are labeled pump recovery until it gets back out to that timed interval. So that's the kind of insight that's provided when we are able to tell the sensor what the pump activity is. So these were all very, very similar, almost identical. Here's another pump event. It's much longer, almost an hour. And you can see there's the pump start, stop, and then the recovery. So it's a longer stress, a different drawdown, and a different recovery. So there's getting to be some insight here into aquifer characteristics. We're taking these data in the same well, so it's not like an aquifer pumping test where you've got a monitoring point, but there is some real value to these data. And the last one I want to show here is this pumping event here, obviously a pumping event, but it's different. This is something's going on here different. There's the timed reading, pump start, stop, recovery, another start, then a stop and recover. So this pump is cycling for some reason. So again, there's some operational insight here. Could be a leak, could be a valve, could be some problem with the sensors. I don't know, but it was resolved, and then we had that recovery going out. So here I just wanted to show the value of the acoustics approach and the value of being able to tag readings. So if you have a residential well that's part of this network, this is the kind of data that you might be able to see from that. I'm going to show you one other thing live, and then we'll go back to the slides, and I'll finish up. This is a Post Oak network that we operate with Post Oak Savannah. The blue are the well intel sensors again, and the yellow are others. These are primarily tape downs that they do. We have not yet brought in any of their pressure transducer data, but we're in the process of that on a new effort that we're taking with them. We have about 35 of our sensors currently with the Post Oak Savannah district, and 30 of those 35 use that very simple local telemetry that we're talking about using for the 8 systems with Lost Pines. So it's been very effective and very efficient with Post Oak. I'm going to show you just one well. This is the Gauze water supply. And again, I'm going to analytics. And the point that I want to show here is that we have historical data, a long history of pump data. Actually, this very first data point, this is depth to water. This first data point, I think, was taken during the well construction. But you see this over time, this long drawdown, almost about 200 feet over the 60 years. And these are all tape measurements. But back about 5 years ago, we brought in well intel sensors to bring in continuous data into this data set. And you can see now how that complements what was already known. We still see that dramatic drawdown, but now you're seeing seasonal changes and really can get some resolution to what's happening, not just twice a year or once a year. You're actually seeing that the seasonal lows are lowering each year. The seasonal highs are lowering each year as well. So there's a lot I'd love to show you around the dashboard, but we'll leave it at that. And I'll just a couple more points here. What we're doing more and more is working with our clients around alerts on levels. As levels get to a certain point, they want to be alerted. As pumping duration changes, they want to be alerted around that. And again, this individual dashboard that volunteer well owners can provide, they can set alerts around that. We're doing reports, custom and standardized reports. We're working with Manville Water Supply Corporation. I know they've got wells in Lee County. And actually they have a Colorado River alluvium well that we monitor for them, but it's in Travis County. But we do reports for districts and for their permittees. We also do API. We do API bring data in. We bring in situ data in via API to our dashboard, and we send our data that are collected by our sensors via API. I'm thinking of California here, API to California agencies for our clients. So any way the data needs to move, it can be done. And then one thing that we're doing for more and more conservation districts are website embeds. I can think of Uvalde County, Winter Garden, Central Texas. These folks are wanting to put their data in front of the public, our system data. And so we give them a little link that they put in their website so the public can come see what the data that they're collecting looks like. We work across a number of industries. No need to talk about that. So I'll end here. There's also in your packet a little bit of a summary of the data that had been collected by well intel sensors, the 4 sensors that had been in the field. If you want me to touch on that, I'm happy to. But this is really what we were here for tonight, I think, was this budget that is structured to get the 8 systems that the district owns up and running on private wells using the local telemetry. So this is assuming that that local telemetry can be used at these sites. President Hernandez, if you want me to go through this line by line, I'm happy to, or if there's questions, I'm happy to respond, whatever you think is best.
Let's ask the board. Any questions from the board?
Have one.
Sure.
Does this contemplate that there's a good internet connection at each location?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat that?
Is it Does your budget require that there's good internet connection at each location?
Yes, this local telemetry assumes that there is adequate internet service at the house or the business, the water supply corporation. So yes, that's the assumption here, is that all we do is plug our gateway into that internet router. It's very safe. There's no additional load to the internet because the data packets are so small. But yes, it does assume that internet does exist.
Question for Jim. Where are those 8 located?
Sort of.
In our closet.
Oh, so they're not monitored, they're not where they used to be.
There were 4 that were deployed, so I'm not sure about that 8 number. There were 4 that were deployed. I don't know if that 8 takes into repositioning those, Chuck. Or
Yeah, so I'm not catching all of that, but there were 10. Let me see if this catches what you were saying. There were 10 originally. 2 of them were destroyed in the field. I think maybe both of them at the sod farm. So there are 3 in the field yet, and 5 in the office is what I believe, because I was there, took inventory of the 5 in the office. So the 3 in the field, because they have been deployed, will need to come back and be reserialized for a new deployment. And that's what is captured here in the budget. But 5 of them are in the office, and I don't think those 5 have ever been deployed. So you've got 5 that are essentially new sensors, but batteries are old. You're going to need new batteries for all of them. And I think we've captured that okay in the budget. So
I don't know where they're going to be prioritized to be located.
that is an open question, and that's something we'd have to work with LRE on figuring out where the best places are. I think based on Alan's presentation, we'd start with Carrizo and Simsboro, but trying to get good geographic distribution on it, both, just across the district. And then once we're confident that it's working, because our cellular system did not work for us. And so
Terrible.
this,
Yeah,
this type of deployment will hopefully work better and give us better results. And if it does, then we can be expanding it out.
So we do need an effort to analyze where's the best placement of these sensors moving forward and assure that there's an internet there. So there's still some homework that we have to do on our end.
Thank you.
So is 8 of those enough to do the job?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a start. I think we should utilize what we have. They're already paid for, just sitting in a closet. So we should utilize those, but we probably should envision that this is a work in progress. As mentioned, Post Oak has 30, 32, 34.
35, yep.
So we may end up in that ballpark range, but at least let's start with what we got. I think Post Oak has about 100 over 100 monitoring wells. And it looks like about 30 of them have this piece of equipment, the sensor on there. So just to give a ballpark figure, but yeah, this is just a starting point, and we may need to grow this further depending.
Yes, I'm kind of wondering, like Tom, it seems like maybe it's too small even for a start, even though we have paid for, but I wonder if we can get feedback from LRE. How many do we really need? Otherwise, if we do 8, don't expand, it's just kind of a long investment.
How long were the first ones out?
We deployed them about 4 years ago, Chuck.
Yeah, I think those first ones were out about 4 years ago.
Remember when we okayed that?
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we should at least utilize what we have, see how beneficial it is, and then assess it at that point. I think it's just a shame that they're just sitting in the
Does
closet.
this require some action tonight?
No, it does not require action tonight because we still have to do our
I
homework.
think
And
we need to table it for further investigation.
yeah, so, I think we're not quite ready tonight because we don't know the locations. I think that should be the first step, is for us to do our homework, identify the 8 locations. and make sure that there are 8 locations out there with internet, and then we can move forward. That'd be my take on this. We don't have to move on this tonight.
I agree with, I think that's not against it.
Yeah.
Just wanna know.
Yeah, and that was the goal of this presentation, was to just get everyone up on the same speed, for everyone to know what this equipment does, and to everyone to understand and know that we've got 5 or 8 of these, 5 or 8 of these.
And so just to recap this estimate, the budget estimate is $8,500 just to get it up and running. And then the next year, the data services would cost $2,500.
As you heard, we need new batteries. There's a couple of 2 or 3 of them that will need to be shipped back to get reserialized.
And how did the 2 get destroyed at the sod farm?
Water, my understanding is they got waterlogged.
So they're fragile.
The sprinkler systems, the low elevation precision application sprinkler heads we would seal up the wellhead, come back the next time, and it'd be upside down and full of water. So after replacing it twice, we just gave up on the site.
And it'd be tough enough.
Yeah, it'd be tough enough for the sprinkler systems. Yes, or for center pivots.
Any other questions? Excuse me. Any other questions for Mr. Dunning? All right, thank you, Mr. Dunning. I think we'll do our homework on our end, and when we're ready, hopefully soon, then we'll get back in touch with you.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
All righty. Then we will move on to item G, discussion, consideration, and possible action on the 2023 Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District Compliance Report. Mr. Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Thank you, Kay, for your feedback on all of my missing commas and poorly phrased sentences. So what was incorporated into your packet is changes that were requested by Kay. I've got, after the packet was sent, I had one more request from Natasha that will need to be included. 15 one word for another, so not a significant or change. We'll make that before it's posted. The compliance report that you have is basically a collection of urine statistics for the district, along with the management goals. And Carol, I did not have time to get the district specific ones in, but we'll do an addendum for it. So before it's posted, I'll add the district specific. As far as the annual statistics go, what we kind of see is that, you know, in terms of non-exempt wells, the rate of growth is very similar to the previous years. We're looking at a fairly steady rate of growth of just over 10 wells per month on average from 2022 and in 2023. This year, it may, for 2024, it may pick up a little bit, but overall, we're seeing a fairly continuous rate of growth for the exempt wells. I guess overall total, it was 157 new wells, 3 pre-existing wells merged with the district. We included some estimates about what that water usage might look like. As we get some more refinements from the LRE data set, we'll be able to break down the exempt usage better by aquifers. But right now, we just kind of did an aggregate for the district. Probably about 3,000 acre feet per year of exempt usage. With regard to non-exempt wells, Table 3 did show what the production was based on permits. We're averaging about 35% of our permitted production across all of our permit holders. Obviously, some are slightly higher than others based on usage. Turf irrigation is higher, but most of our municipals are in that 25 to 35% range. We do still have a permit for MD Anderson, even though MD Anderson shut down 2 years ago. So that's still on our books, but they're not producing at this point in time. So that property ever gets sold, we'll have to deal with that permit at that point. But that's all summarized in Table 3. All of our permit holders, with the exception of Hunter's Crossing, were within bounds. We had a problem with Hunter's Crossing in the past, and I think it really comes down to miscommunication between their maintenance guys and their management. They have 2 water sources for irrigation, and in theory, they have 2 meters. But this is the second time that I've been here where one of the meters went down. And so they just plumbed both systems and ran it through a single meter. So even though they're pumping groundwater or surface water through they were running through their groundwater meter, which resulted in that excessive pumping that you see here. The table 4 we've got, and this was referenced by Mr. Weir earlier. We're looking at the total non-exempt production by aquifer relative to the current DFCs and the model available groundwater from the state. And for all the aquifers in the district, we're basically one degree or another well below the mags. The exception being the 7th borough, where we had about 25,000 acre feet of production relative to the 2020 mag of 20,000 acre feet. So what that indicates is, on a long term, if that trend continues, it's something we need to keep an eye on. It could be a sign that we are on our way to needing curtailments. But if you see in the last planting cycle, the mag was 32,000 acre feet. So it really kind of depends on which planting cycle we're looking at. And as you move into 2030, our current production is well below the mag for the 2030 decade. So it's something that we need to be aware of, but it's not necessarily something that requires imminent action. It's just a trend that we need to keep an eye on.
Tell the other big pumping, come on.
Well, that'll be different. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And then the rest of the report is just covering the state required management goals. Like I mentioned, we'll add the district specific goals before we publish it.
Do we have any of our big permit holders? Have anything planned, maybe within the next 3 years or so?
Recharge is in the process of putting in their monitoring, but they have no pipelines in the ground. So they're moving their project forward, but they're not. I don't know if they're 3 years out or 5 years out, but they are moving. But other than that, it's all.
We're just waiting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And I guess while we're on the subject of well intel and continuous monitoring, all 3 of those monitoring wells are equipped currently, or 3 of the first 3 monitoring wells are equipped with data loggers that are pulling daily data as well. They'll be able to go out on a quarterly basis and download that data and incorporate it. Right, it's just another real time, but it's not real time reporting. So we'll get it on a quarterly basis. And the rest of their monitoring wells will be similarly.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Palmer. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 4H. Discussion, consideration, and possible action on desired future conditions, monitoring well management policy. So this is a DFC well management policy. It was in your packet. The infrastructure committee reviewed an early draft, the first version of this. This has been updated since. And this is a policy to on how to manage our well monitoring data collection, archiving, and reporting. It would be a policy that we would be putting in place so that the district would be following this policy. I believe what is most pertinent and relevant are the number of days. There's a certain number of days that the data must be entered into the district database. And I just want to make sure that the staff is okay with these dates. For example, we have within 30 days of collecting water levels, they'd be put in the database. And within 60 days would be production data, right? It's separated between water level and production data. The water level is 30 days, production data, I just put 60 days. Not sure if that makes sense, Mr. Totten, or if there's.
For product, and you'll have to forgive me, I read it, but I also slept since then. The production data that's from receipt. So we have 90 days or 60 days from receipt.
Yeah, of receipt.
Okay.
Yes, it says receipt of the data.
As long as we don't get penalized when somebody files a late report or something
Right,
like that.
this is within receipt of the data for production, and water level is within 30 days of the collection.
Yep.
Of that. I do want to highlight that we probably do want to make a change regarding water quality. It's on the section 2, the second performance standard. It currently says that the water quality will be collected every 3 years. And we heard today that the recommendation is to have water quality collected 3 out of 5 consecutive years. So I would propose to make that change. Instead of every 3 years, we would be collecting the water quality for 3 out of 5 consecutive years.
And I'm assuming these performance standards will be written through the management plan.
Yes, we could do that. Yeah, and I got them in that format.
That's what I.
Yeah, I took the format
So you
of the
got the-
management plan.
So you have one of them that was from like 2017. There's section 4.
Yeah.
But the others, yeah, no, that's perfect.
There is one item that Mr. Totten brought up that was an issue at Post Oak, Savannah, where they were putting their data, the data collected from the real-time monitoring from their well intel systems. They were putting that up on their website very quickly, quick enough that folks would be able to tell when somebody was home or away or on vacation. Because you could take a look at their water levels and usage, and you could see if there's no usage. People could say, oh, that person might be on vacation since the water hasn't changed in the last week. So I do want to make maybe an exception for that, maybe saying something like private or sensitive data may not follow this policy.
Security.
So could we add something to that effect? I'm looking to our legal counsel, but something to the effect that private, if we can sit, because that real-time data could be, obviously sensitive data. And so maybe if we have a sentence in here that private or sensitive data may not follow this policy.
You gotta let me think about that.
All right.
I think there could be different scenarios that qualify for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Security and
Yeah,
privacy.
so we may have to revisit private and sensitive
Sure.
data and add language to make sure that is being handled properly.
Right. So if you wanted to adopt this tonight, you can go ahead and do that, and then we can come back and amend it.
In the med-
Yeah.
I do think we need to amend that, and consider that,
Sure.
make sure that there could be in this collection process, obviously some data could be considered private and sensitive. We need to be just to take that into consideration.
Possibly the easier solution would be that regardless of the time interval that data is gathered on, it'll only be made public on a daily basis. So that way, there's, we're not giving out,
Real time.
the real-time data.
The real-time data.
Daily aggregate, be made available.
Or something to that effect. So,
And that wouldn't necessarily require a policy change. That could just be a, data accessibility issue.
but yeah, I do believe the real-time data, when I heard
Yeah,
Mr. Dunning, and I saw Mr. Dunning's presentation and your concerns from Post-Oak, I realized that real-time data may be a little sensitive.
Yeah, we may just make that not public facing
Right.
and just do aggregate data.
Right.
That wouldn't be a part of this policy per se. That would just be something we adopt as we go forward.
Right. And then my last comment is in section 3, the reporting section, I believe. In the first set of bullet items, there were 2 that are duplicates. One says non-exempt well, actual production. And then 2 down, it says groundwater production by non-exempt wells, and that seemed to be duplication. So I think, 1, 2, 3, 5,
Scratch
6,
the bottom
7,
one.
yeah, scratch the very last bullet that says groundwater production by non-exempt wells. We could just delete that one. The second bullet above that is a duplicate. In terms of reporting, what's in here, I believe, is everything that's currently done by Mr. Totten and the staff in the district. So in terms of reporting, there's nothing new. It's just documenting what's already being done. And I do have a note that all that reporting is currently being done.
Elvis, is there anything in here that, I mean, for instance, it says the district shall perform a baseline collection of water quality for all DFC wells. What's the timeline on that?
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, there may be new, as DFC wells change, some may come, some may go, and folks. So, as new ones are added, we would do a baseline.
It just seems like right now we are not equipped to do that. And if someone grabs onto the word shall, where does that leave us?
You could say by the end of 2025 or whatever,
You know what
you
I'm
do
saying?
something like
The
that.
word shall kind of
Because
triggers.
that's the way we do our performance standards and our management plan is
Right.
we do sometimes
future date.
quantify the deadlines. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, because there's no date. It just says shall perform
Yeah,
a
so
baseline,
maybe.
or maybe 5 years from now. Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah, so I guess we could propose putting, what was I heard a proposal about just putting a date in there.
Well, we could say by the end of 2025, and then we can go back and change it when we add it to the management plan if we want to. If we find out that's unrealistic, or it could be further,
Isn't there some other way we could?
Yeah, there might be. That's just a quick fix.
Yeah, that's valid. Right? Yeah, I mean, Mr. Standen did say within the next 3 years or so that this would be a process.
How could we kind of qualify that language without it being immediate?
So,
As practicable or?
no, I like the idea of putting in a date, but I am concerned that we don't have any baseline to compare it to. So, annually upon establishing baseline standards, shall evaluate.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, whenever we evaluate the management plan, which we do annually, that could be something that's incorporated once we get those baseline standards.
Okay, so your recommendation one more time, Natasha, would be to add to that
Sure.
sentence?
Shall annually evaluate water level, water quality and production trends upon establishing baseline standards.
Okay,
I could come up with that off the fly. I could not do security and privacy. But yeah, we can look at that later, security and privacy.
okay, so we'll add that, that annually there, and we'll change the 3 years to 3 out of 5 consecutive years. And we'll delete that duplicate. It seems like with the private or sensitive data, we may or may not need addition. Depending.
That's what it sounds like. So we need to put our heads
Yeah,
together.
you guys may
Yeah.
work out something where we won't, may not need to change, but. So that's the management policy to govern the district on how to manage the data collection and archiving and reporting of water levels and water quality and production.
So I make a motion that we pass the resolution that is with the changes that we just discussed to the performance standards. The district shall annually perform the baseline collection and we put in 3 years out of 5 consecutive years. And deleting the last groundwater protection language that was in section 3.
May I hear a motion? Seconded by Director Cole. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
You're opposed, Ken? Okay, we have one in opposition, Director Rudd. So the motion passes. And with that, we'll move on to regular agenda item 4I. The discussion, consideration, and possible action on amendment to the district procurement policy. This originated from Mr. Totten. And it was discussed in our governance committee meeting. Right now, the procurement policy is pretty strict in that anything above $5,000 has to come before the board. That's been quite restrictive at times, and has delayed, some items. Because it has to come to the board and then, and to and from, and so so there's been a couple of items, in particular, when we were, redoing this building. I remember, the ductwork in particular took like 3 months because, and another issue, and there were other issues that have been just above 5,000. And so the change or the amendment to the procurement policies upping that 5,000 to 15,000. And I believe that's the primary change.
Bobby,
That's
saw
correct.
you
Right,
were,
Bobby? That's
That's
just,
the main change.
the main
Everything else
change is
is-
going from 5,000 to 15,000
That's
in
correct.
what Mr. Totten is allowed to purchase.
And that's per the professional services policy, I believe, that's the maximum. The chapter 2254, I can't remember, but there is a phrase, depending on what kind of entity we are,
correct.
how high we can go.
It is a bit higher, but we looked at different best practices
Right.
and
That is 2254, that's
So I fully support that, working at UT, I know we got up to 25,000 because we were at 5,000 for years, so it's the biggest handicap of doing your job. I just have one question on page 3, competitive proposals. Why it was changed to there is no minimum requirement for the number of proposals the bid must receive. I know sometimes you can only get one, that's all you could find, because there's nobody else in the market for it. But I was just curious what the rationale was for that. If anybody, Jeff, I did.
Sure, I can speak to that. It is precisely what you stated. I mean, you can make your diligent best efforts and then only have one. So we wouldn't want to prevent an action because we didn't have more than one. So that's just clarifying.
Yeah, because that would be sole source in some cases, but, I just wanted to make sure that we're still going to try to get more than one proposal.
Right.
Because that's just best practice.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Several years ago, when we went out for auditing services, we got one.
Right.
So in that case, this just makes it explicit that hiring that firm would not have been a violation of the district rules. We wouldn't have had to keep rebidding,
Right.
hoping for other submissions.
Especially when we live in not in a big urban area, it's much more difficult. Nice, sounds good to me.
Any other questions on the amendment to the procurement policy? The change from 5,000 to 15,000. I see no questions. All right, entertain a motion.
I move that we approve this, procurement policy.
A motion to, motion to accept the amendment to the procurement policy. Motion by Director Rogers, do I hear a second? Second by Director Semang. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Item 4J, discussion, consideration, and possible action on the purchase of a well camera.
Speaking of getting data and finding screened intervals,
Yes, today is the day of the wells. Today's the DFC well theme.
so previously we had an offer from Post Oak Savannah to purchase their well camera. Is about a 500-foot well camera for 13,000. We did know that it had been a refurbished unit. It did not come with a warranty. So what you have in front of you are 3 bids from 3 other companies, going from lowest to highest. A company called wellcamera.com Incorporated. Lowest bid with a 600-foot downhole camera system for $12,450, so about $500 less than the system that Post Oak was trying to sell us. I will say it's got a decent warranty in terms of parts, labor, and parts. And instead of a delivery charge, the salesman actually offered to drive the unit to us if we decide to buy from them. They're based out of the Dallas area, so no shipping cost. But other than that, this was the first bid. Second bid that came in is for a system from Stroll. The board had mentioned at the last meeting, you was more comfortable with that possibly 1,000-foot system. This one has, strangely enough, most of these are sold in meters. So it's actually 1,050 feet of cable, so we can do wells down to 1,050 feet. Shipping is included as part of the purchase price, so the overall purchase is about 14,400, so just slightly more than what Post Oak Savannah had been asking. It does come with a 1-year warranty on for parts and labor and all that. And then the final option came from a company, Laval Underground Surveys. Their quote totaled out at 19,000. That is for another 1,050-foot reel camera system, all the controls and everything else that's incorporated. They did not provide an the information of the warranty in time for the meeting, but they also included $500 in shipping and the fact that we have to provide our own forklift. So,
Which one would you like, Jim?
I lean towards the stroll.
Yeah.
I think that's
It's the long.
yes, sir. Yeah. So the last two are both over 1,000 feet. So I would lean towards the stroll though, because the price and the warranty, and they were the most responsible companies that I dealt with.
That's the middle one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So that's 14,400.
I move that we approve the purchase of a well camera with the proposal from Roll.
Your motion?
Second.
Motion and a seconded by Director Smith. The motion is made by Director Asufi to purchase the Stroll well camera. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, hearing it.
One question.
Question, sure.
You purchase the camera, how often do you think it will be used?
So it really is going to depend on how active the mitigation program becomes going forward. But it can also, I would have liked to have found a system that we could deploy without having to pull piping and pumps, but I couldn't find anything that was really purpose built for that. So it would be nice to be able to use it together, some of this data that LRE has talked about, but unfortunately, the only way to get that is to pull the pump out as well.
Or we could use this new camera?
Yes, sir. So it will be used in the mitigation. It'll be used in, if we have questions about completion on new wells. Is it going to be used every day? No, sir. But a couple of times a month, most likely, yes, sir.
Okay. So we won't wear it out for.
I hope not.
Okay,
Thank you again.
so the motion passed.
Yes, sir.
All right, item 4A. Discussion, consideration of and possible action on proposals for district computers. I believe last month we had one proposal last month.
Yes.
Do we have any further? Any updates?
I have not gotten any updates from Stratmont with that. I pinged them on Monday, haven't gotten any response yet, so.
Have you checked Best Buy and Amazon, because you can get some bids on the same years, probably it's really 5 minutes. I mean, if they have the same ones.
I farmed it out to the people that y'all hired for IT services, so.
Okay, so it's farmed out to Stratmont. We're waiting on
To
that.
find their quotes, yes, sir.
Okay,
All
all right.
I can certainly cut that off, but
Well, I started to do it for you, but I just didn't have it with that info with me handy.
well, we need comparable specs to what they were looking to buy, comparable warranties, and so I was just letting them handle that. But with the change in the procurement policy, it's less of an issue now. I'd still like to see the other quotes from other vendors before we pull the trigger, but at this point, we don't have those yet.
Right. I mean, right now, Stratmont is recommending Dell.
Yes.
That's what I was. That's fine.
Right.
You know, if you buy them with a certain kind of credit card, you could double your warranty.
Is that kind of straightforward?
All right, so we'll table this.
Yes.
Can we go ahead and approve the purchase of the computers
I'll say good.
depending on,
Well, now that we've upped the purchase policy to 15,000,
It's kind of a point.
right, because
Yeah.
the Dell
It was 8,000
It
for,
was 8,000, so.
for two desktops and two laptops, yes, sir.
So it should come under the 15,000. We won't have to approve it.
I'd still, like I say, I'd still like to see the
Yeah.
quotes, but
Yeah.
at this point, I think that, you know, it falls under the new procurement policy.
Shall be those.
Yes, ma'am.
You've
Yeah.
given up on
I see the staff.
anybody on the board here.
No,
Or even it.
that's not on the table.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
for this.
Okay.
Yeah, we gave up on, yeah, we're not pursuing that. It seemed like a little overkill. A little too much. Okay, then we will table that, or Mr. Totten can handle that on his own.
We'll have an update one way or
We'll have
another
an
for the next
update,
meeting.
All right, next item is 4L, discussion and consideration of possible action on the LRE water socioeconomic study proposal. Vince, are you gonna be talking on this one?
So I'll be here to answer or address any questions. We also have Charles White online right now. He was also the subcontractor that is referenced in the back end of this proposal. I wanted to give him the opportunity to introduce himself and tell the board a little bit more about who he is, what his background is, what his qualifications are. The board is interested in hearing that. But he is here and available. You understand who we are as a company, LRE Water. Socioeconomics is something that is a little bit outside our realm, our area of expertise as it relates to that social side of that equation. And that's why we pinged Charles here to help us with that. We can do the economic side, the hydroeconomic modeling as it relates to this, and we can do it very well. We can develop the fancy dashboards that allow the district and its constituents to interact with that data, but there's that one piece of it that us hydrogeologists like to skirt around, and that's that social side of socioeconomics. And so that's where Charles, it becomes a vital piece of this project, if the board decides to fund it. So anyways, if the board is open and amendable to it, I'd love to give Charles the chance to speak with you.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, Charles, take it away.
Thanks, Vince, and very good evening to everyone. Thanks for the invitation to be here. I'll keep it quick because I know it's getting late, but I've been reflecting over these conversations on how incredible it is on how much cooperation and resource y'all are putting into such a valuable resource of groundwater. I was reflecting on the saying that cooperation is the linchpin for effective groundwater management, and everything I've been hearing tonight is just underscoring how serious y'all take this. So in that context, I was really pleased to be invited by Vince to help on this really important project because as we all know, I'm from Texas as well, and I know the saying, the eyes of Texas are upon you, but I think now actually there are a lot of eyes on Texas for dealing with this issue. And so I'm really energized by the opportunity to hopefully get to work on this issue that extends beyond y'all's groundwater conservation district. This is a super important topic at the global scale as well. I've been working on freshwater science for over 10 years, including some work in Texas for my PhD work, really looking at how different people and different users value water. And so I think it will be a great team to kind of lead this pioneering work that could come out of y'all's conservation district. So also happy to answer any questions. Hopefully the hard ones y'all can give to Vince, but I can back him up on anything else.
What is your background?
So I'm pardon?
Are you an economist?
Some people may call me that, but I like to refer to myself as a freshwater scientist. So I'm a geographer. All three of my degrees are in geography. I started out with kind of Vince on the geomorphology side of it. Then I kind of went to the water scarcity side of it. That's what my PhD work was on. So that integrated hydrology, economics, and governance. I work with a lot of economists as a consultant at the World Bank. And so I kind of see myself as a journalist on this.
Thank you.
Yep.
Where'd you do your work? What college?
University of Oxford in the UK.
I've got a question. Yes, sir. I'm extremely troubled that there was no literature survey. That's because, you know, one of the things in evaluating proposals is how effective and well done was the literature survey with regard to what you plan to do? And that also reinforces, for me, the qualifications and the lack of economy. So before moving forward with this proposal, I'd much rather see a literature review incorporated into, for example, there are conceptual models already in existence. So are you going to create a new one?
So I think that's the conversation Charles and I had as we were whiteboarding this idea here. There are a lot of different stakeholders just within this room. And when you consider the board members and the constituents that each board member represents, as we look across both Bastrop and Lee County. So there's a lot of different considerations and a lot of different ways that we could weight something like this. And so as you look at the proposal there, part of that proposal, that first phase is to do that comprehensive literature review to develop the conceptual model that works best for Lost Pines, not to necessarily take something that's already been created out there that works well for California, but to work with the Lost Pines Board of Directors, the stakeholders.
So you're trying to tell me that a conceptual model developed for California has absolutely no application for Lost Pines.
I'm not going to say no application, but the goal of this proposal is to work specifically with the board and figure out what the board is most interested in, and then develop that conceptual model holistically with the board's insights, with the board's feedback. And Charles, feel free to jump in here too. I know this is something we were working through and trying to better. We provided that page 1 introduction to show that we understand that the conversation at hand here, that we understand that there's a lot of different factors to consider. But as we really started getting into the weeds of this, we know how we would want to do this, but we don't know if that aligns well with how the board would like for us to do that. So that's why we wanted to make this kind of a working, living proposal. This is our draft proposal. We're also open to suggestions for improvements here. But Charles, do you want to jump in and kind of piggyback off some of those early conversations we had here?
Yeah, and I think, Vince, you said it well. And actually, there was a comment at the beginning of this by another gentleman talking about the importance of stakeholder involvement in this. So the idea, and actually this was echoed in the Nature Communications piece in June 2023 by Deborah Prony et al., is that stakeholder integration predicts better outcomes from groundwater sustainability policy. So we are well versed in this literature, and we recognize that the requirements and the values of water in these different counties and within y'all's groundwater conservation district are going to be different. And so it's crucial to co-develop that conceptual framework, and one that actually meets the value system basically, and how y'all are looking at the future of this, as opposed to trying to fit one to that. So that's kind of the idea, is that we are familiar with the literature on this, but we wanted to create space to co-develop that, which sets the framework for the technical framework that comes after the conceptual framework.
Another question, although I'm not quite satisfied with that answer. How much economic model? Which economic models are you planning to use? Because you have a whole section in the proposal where you're going to do modeling, and there's lots of economic models having to do with socioeconomics and ecosystem services. So, which is the best ones? Which is the worst? And how are you going to do that? You won't understand from the proposal how that goes into play.
And Charles, I'll let you pick up on that, but I know we were leaning towards agent-based modeling approach to this. And I think slightly staying away from more of the economic modeling and taking a slightly different approach there. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but.
Well, Vince, that was the initial idea, but I think, as you said beforehand, the idea of this proposal was to provide the space and the opportunity to decide on the model after we got a very clear consensus on what the goals and objectives are. It's very easy by the way, for economists to come in and say, we're going to do cost benefit analysis here because that's what we specialize in, or we're going to do agent-based modeling here because that's what we specialize in. And I think it may be to the benefit of y'all's future conditions in the quite literal sense to ensure that the whatever model is chosen is the one that fits best for the objective which is co-created by the stakeholder engagement early on.
I do want to give the board some feedback from the GMA 12 meeting.
Sir,
Okay, yeah, I know many of you attended remotely or were there. So at last week at the GMA 12, this was brought up and the proposal was brought up. I brought up if we could possibly do a joint funding and jointly with the other GCDs at the GMA 12. Two of the GCDs, Brazos Valley and Post Oak, they stated that they already had a methodology in place. It was based upon their existing mitigation program. So they take, the money that they are either projecting to spend as part or have spent as part of the mitigation program, and they use that as their economic portion. Obviously, it's limited. It's not, all encompassing, but it's more than what other GCDs do. We learned other GCDs don't even do that much, and so there was reluctance by Post Oak and Brazos to join in on this type of modeling and funding of it. Certainly, the two smaller GCDs. It would be difficult for them to fund something like this because they just don't have this in their budget. And the Brazos and Post Oak, the two bigger guys, they were of the opinion of, well, we already have a method. So the reason I bring that up is because this is one of the 9 factors that we need to consider at the GMA 12. But it needs buy-in from all the GCDs at the GMA 12 for that to be effective. If we just do it, and the other GCDs at GMA don't, it's not going to be effective as one of the evaluation.
yeah, I heard that, Elvis, and hearing the responses from Brazos and Post Oak, it was clear to me that the Lost Pines socioeconomic study could be a model, but we're going to have to do it first to get other people to buy in and that's why I think it's really important that we get it right when doing this study. And so you've had discussions with Charles about agent-based versus something else, but in the literature, what is your justification for your approach? That's why the literature review is critical, and until that literature review is completed, I can't see moving forward with the other phases because there's just not enough substance for me to make an evaluation.
And I did, possibly recommend at the GMA 12 that we possibly implement this in phases. I do think this would be something awesome for if we could get a state grant or a federal grant, then we would get buy-in from the other GCDs. But that wouldn't happen tomorrow. That's not going to happen immediately. So, but
Part of the reason that, I'm kind of being difficult with this, and my apologies. I really think it's important that this study gets done and it gets done correctly. So I provided you with some of these things like groundwater and ecosystem services, a framework for managing small older groundwater dependent agrarian socioecologies. And then Texas Ecosystem Services, a statewide assessment. So why do you even need to do a study where this paper has said that $629 an acre is ecosystem services provided, socioeconomic impact? So with this paper, could you do a better job? I mean, this paper says that's the socioeconomic, and this is for Bastrop and Lee counties. So it's there. So that's why I want the literature. I want the support and understanding of how to make it better.
we also discussed at the GMA 12 having other I guess, stakeholders, meaning, other, hydro consultants, like Posta would like Tara and Steve Young to participate in this. And there was a gentleman, Dr. Justin Thompson. He was saying, hey, I'd like to, participate in this. So we had several stakeholders there at the GMA that were, wanted to kind of be involved, or at least like peer review, I guess.
Justin would be great. It would be Bureau of Economic Geology,
Yeah,
I believe.
yeah, Bureau.
He really thinks this is.
So
important.
there were other folks that wanted to have an eye on this as well.
Well, I think, one of my big frustrations at the last DFC was that all we heard was models, models, models. And I wanted to hear, hey, we're a rural area butted up against a huge burgeoning, urban area. We've got the I-35 corridor. All of those things are just bearing down on us and attracting water marketers like crazy. And who talked about that? No, we got a new model. So,
And then we talked about the regional plans for demand and how much money would be if we don't get this water. But what happens to us? That's exactly right. I think it's extremely important. I support Tom that we go forward with something locally and maybe we can inspire them. And for the next round,
Yeah.
let's do what we can. And then if we do a good job, then perhaps next time they'll sign on.
Yeah, realistically, it was discussed that anything that we do probably won't be done in time for this cycle. At least that's probably likely, but we need to start. I mean, it's the best time to plant the tree is yesterday. Next best time is tomorrow, right?
It's already changing so fast.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the perspective from the GMA 12 was that there was pushback from the big guys that they already had it back.
So one example, question is, do we know how much the alluvial aquifers with the miles of Colorado River contribute to the flow of the Colorado River?
great question.
So the alluvial aquifer system itself, whether or not that's directly in communication, I think there's still work to be done there. We already have studies and data out there that talks about the interaction of those outcropping areas and the connection between the losing and gaining stream segments. So that type of information is out there. And then the model results that we saw through some of the LCRA litigation.
The point I wanted to get to was that if you know that contribution, let's say it's 5% during normal flows and 10% during drought, then you could take that 5% and multiply that times the recreation and fisheries production of the Colorado River, and that becomes the socioeconomic impact.
And Director Arsufi, I mean, this is the exact conversation we were hoping to generate through the proposal. This was a draft proposal that we provided. It is open to be revised, to be edited. But part of the first two steps of this proposal is to have these conversations with yourself, with other stakeholders, to figure out what direction to steer this. Through the lens that Charles and I were doing this through, there were two big things here. How does this have an economic impact on those local communities, those local individual landowners, that local economy? But how does something like Vista Ridge permeate through the social fabric of, say, Lexington? That has a far differing impact than just those economic implications there. How does this change, what people are discussing on a Friday night? People aren't talking about the football game anymore. They're talking about their water levels going down. So taking that into account, that into consideration, but then also tying that back to those economics, looking at that census, that demographic data. Are we looking at people that are potentially on fixed income, and then being able to tie that back into some of those water level declines and how that specifically then relates to economics? So I think specifically looking at the ecosystem services, we were skirting around that slightly because that's how we were conceptualizing this proposal. But these types of conversations are exactly what we're hoping to generate with the group to figure out exactly how to steer this, how to really develop that conceptual model in a way that satisfies what's most important to Lost Pines.
So you think phase one is something that we should report? As opposed to all 5 or 3 phases?
So the way we broke it up, it was step by step in a way where it could be acted upon in individual steps or phases there, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. The phase 3 piece of it though, that is the reporting. That is where we're generating the report. So if you just do 1 without 3, you're kind of missing that.
Well, can't
piece of
you
it,
add a
but-
report to phase 1?
So, and Charles, jump in here at any time you'd like to, but I think we can. Charles is the academic, I'm the geologist here, and I've been working with Charles on different projects over the years. So we work well together, but Charles, I think, has a few more insights here into how we should and could go about doing this in a way that may be a little bit more easily digestible for the board here.
Well, the short answer, and I think I heard everything. The short answer is yes, of course. We can add reports on the end of whatever phases. As Vince alluded to earlier, we were trying to make a step-by-step iterative process because we didn't want to say that we knew all the answers beforehand without serious, not just lip sync, but serious in investment with the community. So if, for example, this suggestion of a report after phase 1 or phase 2 or what have you, if that's what is valued and what's needed, then I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that. Again, that's demand driven insights, and that's, I think, what it's all about. What is best for y'all, really.
May I ask a question? Mr. Arsufi, would you then like to see this literature review done first?
Yes.
So that's the terminology's literature review?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that should be the task that we give to Vince, is to perform this literature review first.
And could I ask a clarifying question on that? I'm happy to do that, obviously. In terms of the outcome of that literature review, is it just that you want to kind of a list of all the different types of applicable socioeconomic studies for groundwater management, or are you looking for a specific recommendation at the end of it? Or are we looking for only Texas specific? Just curious the bounds and the scope of that.
You're an academic, Charles. Have you reviewed the NSF proposals or EPA proposals or USDA proposals?
NSF, yes, sir.
Okay, so then one of the criteria for evaluating a proposal is how well they do with the literature proposal in terms of what they're proposing to do.
Yep.
That's what we're asking.
Right.
Okay.
Vince, or could you please expound on task 1.1, which says review the literature on social economic analysis in the context of groundwater use to develop a framework that aligns with the realities and expectations in the district. Could you put a little bit more meat on that statement, please?
Absolutely. And it's very timely because this is what we were just talking about. So as initially designed, the idea was to embark on that literature review after some consultation with y'all and other priority stakeholders as defined, by the way, by y'all, because what we're trying to do is efficiently get from the world of socioeconomic indicators and frameworks and methods down to something that is reasonable in the Texas water management framework, and then go down a little bit further, which is realistic for Lost Pines district and values in general. So that was actually designed to do what I think now we're being tasked with, but we had envisioned doing it after some more consultation to really try to help more efficiently get down to what's really, really important for y'all in terms of the objectives.
Okay, am I right in assuming that we're all gonna have homework assignments that's gonna tie into whatever this literature review or whatever it's going to be called is done?
Or elders could appoint an ad hoc committee, or we could have a full board work day. Depends on how much work we want to put into it. Bob obviously has a lot more expertise in this area. You know,
So it seems like we're asking you to do the phase one, task 1-1 is what we're asking you for, correct?
That's how I'm interpreting.
Okay.
I think so.
So what we're asking is, hey, we'd like to see that task 1-1 of phase one. We'd like to see that first.
But also, what's important is that they incorporate the literature review in their other tasks. For example, the conceptual model. There are papers out with conceptual models, in these papers here where they're going to look at livestock, irrigation effects. I mean, that stuff is out there. And the other question that Nick just brought up that made me ask, the time frame was you're going to get this all done in a year. And yet, okay, so 4 months for phase one, and task 3 is perform data collection. Now, the data that I think you're going to have to collect is probably going to take more than a year. So how is that possible? And that's where there's not enough information to make an assessment.
I guess maybe.
And Charles, I don't know if you can speak to the work that y'all previously did out there with the Temple Foundation in East Texas, kind of what data y'all put together for that. Is that public yet?
Well, the short version is yes. The tool is public, Vince. And the short version to help put a thread through this is that yes, data collection historically in most water projects does take the longest, and it is obviously very, very important. We are trying with this report is to provide a framework for collecting this data in an efficient way. And so that's why we wanted to start with this conceptual framework to better understand what is really the priority here so that the time that we do spend on the data collection is really hitting those priority pieces.
Can we ask you, Vince, to revise your proposal? Perhaps spend time with Dr. Arsufi and get comments from the board, and then revise your proposal and bring it back to us?
And the draft stamp was the initial intent
Yeah.
there, why we provided this as
Absolutely.
a draft. So it is a working document. Thinking of NSF proposals, I wrote one myself back in the day, and that was a 10-page literature review where I used every space of every margin to pull that one off. So there is a lot that goes into a literature review, and we could spin our wheels for 3 months putting that together, and it could be the complete opposite direction that 7 of the 10 board members actually went ahead with that. So I know a lot of it is going through the literature in terms of painting that narrative of this is what was done early historically, this is what's been done more recently. Now we're going to narrow our focus to Texas. Now we're going to narrow our focus more to.
But the literature review, if you're doing it right, it's crafted towards the conceptual model. It's crafted towards the models. For example, you said you were favoring an agent model. Well, the literature review would tell us these are the benefits of doing an agent model as opposed to some other model.
I see what angle you're from now. Thank you for that extra color and clarity there. And
So perhaps the infrastructure committee, Mr. Arsufi, you're on the infrastructure committee, and Nick's on the infrastructure committee. Melissa's on, so maybe the infrastructure committee is the best committee to provide you with the feedback and the comments and to take a first draft look of the revision, of this new revision.
That sounds appropriate. And to piggyback off of the other comment you made about data collection, just to wrap that one up. The way we were thinking about this was tapping into census demographic data, tapping into the hydrogeologic model, which we've already built, tapping into these water level surfaces, which we're currently developing through Task 10, utilizing a lot of that data that we're already collecting on the geology side, also utilizing the big data sets that are out there available to us, but then diving in where we need to collect site-specific data. If something that's very important is related to these large water projects, diving in specifically to those large water projects, better understand what that pumpage is, what those impacts are, how it's going to impact our regional water levels. But if maybe the focus is more about local well impacts and how that's having a more specific impact on, say, individual homeowners, there would be a different approach in that data collection. So it is working with the board. It's better understanding what the priorities of the board are throughout this. This is why we've crafted it as phase one, which is really information gathering, doing that literature to review, developing a conceptual model as a group instead of us in a little silo over here, but then working our way to that data collection to where, as Charles said, we could be very focused and very site specific. And we were trying to cram all this into a year timeline. Charles, he's already told me he's committed to this project and he has time available to commit to this. I have time available. We have other staff at LRE available. We know a year is a very short fuse on this, but we also wanted to make sure that we were getting it out there just in time in case there is any opportunity for this to work its way into maybe just the GMA 12 report there. We know it's going to be too late in the cycle to work its way into the modeling, but at least get it in front of the GMA to where they can write a paragraph or two about the results from Lost Pines in the study here.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention too, Andy Weir did a socioeconomic study a number of years ago. And your socioeconomic study a number of years ago, and what, I forget the number, but it was close to $1 billion.
Well, there was some flaw, there was one flaw in that model.
It was significant, but yes. But
But all of my point is, livestock, that was one of the data collections that could be.
All right, so why don't we have it where the infrastructure committee meets with you, Vince, over the next couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so, and helps you revise the proposal. And then you can come back with the revised proposal with input from the infrastructure committee. Okay?
Sounds like a good next step. And
All right.
thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, Vince. And
Thank you.
Charles. Thank you, Charles. Wherever you go. Is that good? Everybody satisfied?
Yeah, I think that's.
All right. Okay, item 4M, committee reports with possible board discussion, no action will be taken. Financial Services Committee did not meet. The Governance Committee did meet. It's in your packet. We had a discussion with Greg Ellis to discuss the priorities for 2025 legislature priorities. The social media policy is not yet ready for the groundwater districts. He will let us know when that is ready. We talked about this status on this email for the staff and directors that should be in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll get that email for all of our staff and directors on the new system. And we spoke about having the Texas Water Development Board come and present about their Springs Initiative. We'll be planning that for either September or October. We met last week with the GMA 12. And I reviewed with them an open action item list with the GMA 12. I think that went over quite well. And we do need to start an auditor RFQ sometime soon to get that done by before the end of the year, I guess. That was it. And then we just planned for this board meeting. The infrastructure committee did not meet.
We did not meet, but it is my understanding that the building painting and signs are in progress.
Yay. Do we know what color you're painting the building? White. Awesome. Okay, you're checking it wasn't purple or something.
Is that in anticipation of the open house tomorrow?
Tomorrow they're gonna do it?
Really? Wow.
They did a pre-treat yesterday. They should be painting tomorrow.
Good,
And then once that's done, we'll have the signs delivered.
Great.
Peggy and Dana have done a good job coordinating that.
Great.
Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you, girl. All right, education and outreach, I think you did meet just recently.
Yes, I have a summary from Claire. This first thing are accomplishments, Alden's newsletter, and newspaper column. Starting in September, she wants to print physical copies of a newsletter so that board members can take those out into the community and deliver them, because it has been decided it's not best use of her time for her to do this based on what we pay her. So if you would like copies, if you could take them to the feed store, wherever you might go, please let Claire know how many copies. Social media posts and videos. She said, please remind the board members to follow @Lost Pines GCD and interact with posts to increase reach. And of course, we're active on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Wildlife Expo tabling, we established valuable connections with community group members before each leader invited her to present to her group. Successful first tabling experience with insights on improving and increasing engagement. And that was here in Giddings at the high school on August 2nd. Education and Outreach Unit Strategic Plan. Claire's been working really hard to develop an internal strategic plan for the Education and Outreach Unit's mission, vision, values, principles, program design, assessment, etc. It is long. It is very detailed and it's very impressive. Yeah. She's also adapted content from our management plan, incorporating new insights and priorities. And of course, you know, some of the management plan does have things regarding education outreach. And she's working with our committee, you know, to edit that. Upcoming dates. September, she's partnering with Camo Ag Extension for Bastrop 4th grade water field days. This is going to be in Bastrop. October, partnering with Camo Ag Extension Rainwater at Harvesting Adult Education Workshop. That's here in Lee County. October 5th, the project tabling of the Smithfield Sustainable Public Garden Show. The theme is Water for Life. Claire says this is a board member opportunity. She encourages board members to consider attending this tabling event between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Basically, if we have more than 5 people, it would be a quorum, so it would need to be posted. But basically, to help her interact with the public, you know, to meet people in the public as a board member. November 10th, tabling at the Bastrop County Local Food Fair. November 16th, presenting to the Texas Master Naturalist on Groundwater 101. And upcoming programs, school in session, emailing principals and teachers all this week to offer educational resources and supplements. Seniors Essay Scholarship Contest this fall. She's written timelines, rules, and it will be announced to high school principals any day now. And a poster contest for public K through 12 in the spring. And that's it. She's a busy girl. She's doing an excellent job.
Let me add one more thing that she did. She developed a strategic plan for the education and outreach parts of her job. So that was a 10-page item that has some really good content in there.
Excellent. It was incredible. We should do the sign. We'll never get to it.
All right. Next up, the management committee did not meet this month. So next up is item 4N, general manager's report. No action will be taken. Mr. Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. During the reporting period from July 1st through July 31st, 2024, the district registered 14 new temp wells. We also registered 1 pre-existing well in the district 1300. With regard to drought across the district, our good luck streak has continued up and through at least the end of July. With July being the 5th wettest July on record in Lee County and the 8th wettest on record in Bastrop County. Overall, across both counties, it is the 5th and 14th, respectively, wettest years on record in the last 130 years. So even though the spigot may have turned off on August 1st, we were still doing fairly well with regard to rainfall and drought across the district. As President Hernandez mentioned, GMA 12 did meet on July 31st. I'll skip over the points that President Hernandez already touched on. There are 2 points that I will go into. One of them is scheduling. In October 2022, GMA 12 adopted a schedule for how we proceed through this planning cycle. My original memo for that schedule is attached to this report. It includes the schedule that was adopted, which was option B. I've gone back through, looked at option B, looked at where we're at today, and developed a new schedule for going forward. And by and large, there's not a lot of difference. We're somewhat remarkably pretty close to being on schedule. We missed a few deadlines, need to be moved forward, but that new modified schedule B is attached to this report. The other point that came up during the GMA 12 was cost sharing between districts. And I will not claim that this is the finest PowerPoint that was ever, or I'm sorry, spreadsheet that was ever made, but I went through and looked at the 2024 operating budgets for the 5 districts in GMA 12. Came up with the total amount for the operating budget for the districts, and then broke that down by district in terms of percentages. And what you see is Fayette County GCD, their total revenue is about 5% of the total revenue of GMA 12. Mid-East Texas is about 2.5%. Brazos Valley is just over 10.5%. We represent 17.5% of the revenue. And Post Oak Savannah is almost 64% of the revenue within the GMA. So in terms of how money coming into the districts is spread across the GMA, we have 1 very well funded district, 2 that are pretty comparable, and 2 that are kind of light on income. Fayette County, I'm sorry, Mid-East Texas, their operating budget for 2024 was rounded $180,000 for the year.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah. So at the other end of the spectrum, Post Oak Savannah's operating budget's around $4.7 million. So we have a pretty big economic disparity on how the districts are funded and the amount of funds they have available to them. If you look at the last planning cycle, estimated cost for the last planning cycle is about $700,000. On a per district basis, that's about, if we split it evenly across all districts, that'd be $140,000. That comes out to about $28,000 per year per district across that planning cycle. Which, again, that's not much for us. It's not much for, it's a drop in the bucket for Post Oak, but if you look at Mid-East Texas, that would be almost 15% of their annual budget, every year across that 5-year planning cycle. One of the things that was discussed was, rather than splitting from each district on a pro rata, splitting the cost evenly between all 5 districts, there is an issue there in trying to get districts to commit to money, commit funding that they don't have, making them commit to essentially capital outlays that they can't afford based on their current budget.
Well, my understanding is that there's some sort of state law
Correct.
that prevents a government entity from acquiring services that they cannot afford.
Right.
So they literally cannot pursue an equal share option. That's just not a viable option for them.
And what we, what that my previous breakdown shows, $28,000 per year across a 5-year cycle. Then $28,000, that would be an equal share portion. But that's still a significant, portion of the Mid-East Texas budget. It's about almost 7% of Fayette County's budget on an annualized basis. So technically, any of them could afford it, but whether they can afford it without, having to turn the lights off or shut off, I'm not sure what sacrifice would be required for some of these smaller districts to make. So I didn't want to create the impression that it couldn't be afforded. It's within their budgets, but it's not necessarily reasonable to expect that level of commitment from the districts. But if we take that same $700,000 and apply it based on the percentage of revenue relative to the other districts in the GMA, that first set of numbers I gave you, what you'll see, this last column in the first set of rows, for us, it would come out to about $24,000 per year. Whereas previously we were looking at around 25 to 26, so it'd save us about $2,000 from what we had been spending. This is I think a more reasonable approach, because it's portioning costs based on relative incomes. The snarky part of my brain wants to save from each district according to its abilities and each according to its needs, but I won't say that. But this does represent a more fair distribution of cost based on the fact that we have 5 very different districts, with 5 very different funding authorizations, 5 different words of the night, socioeconomic situations. Mid-East Texas actually has a higher rate for production than we do. and they still bring in significantly less. So that discussion occurred. I would like to be able to go back, and we don't have to make a decision tonight, but I'd like to be able to go back and say that we're okay with doing not equal cost sharing, but sharing relative to a percentage of budget. So take some time, mull that over, and we can revisit it next month.
Well, I think the problem is they still get a full vote and those two small districts.
We can't control that.
I know, but they constantly vote down, you know, what we want, but yet they're not paying anything. So I have a real hard time, you know, saying, okay, I understand they can't afford it. We can't, you know, but at the same time, why should they get an equal vote if they can't contribute? I mean, I know it's the law, but it's just not right. Something that we need to talk to our legislators about, because they're tiny. Why should they get an equal vote in GMA?
Yeah, I think it's a separate bigger, it's a separate bigger issue that needs legislature or other avenues to tackle that.
Yeah, like I said, mull it over, we'll make it as an action item for next month, and I can go back to the GMA with
Yeah, we do
some
have,
sort of guidelines on that.
we will have the September board meeting before the next GMA 12, so we will have one more opportunity to discuss this before the next GMA 12.
I just wanted to put the figures in front of y'all and get y'all started thinking about
Yeah,
how we might approach
all
that.
right, thank you.
Previously, I'd mentioned that Region G was doing something interesting about making a recommendation in their next regional planning document regarding the junior water rights provision on interface and transfer of surface water. I went to the August meeting, spent the entire day freezing in the River Authority offices, and that topic never actually came up. I talked with their policy committee, members of their policy committee, and sure, oh yeah, we'll talk about it today. And after 3 hours of debate about something unrelated, it never came up. But the day was not entirely wasted. There is currently a request by the City of Georgetown to retroactively modify the last regional planning document to allow Georgetown to claim all of the unclaimed model available groundwater in Brazos County. Brazos County obviously opposes this, says that MAG doesn't exist. It went back and forth for about an hour before it finally got kicked up to the Water Development Board to determine whether or not this constitutes a minor amendment or a major amendment to the plan, which then determines how this will proceed. So we'll keep an eye on it. This is really just turf battles between City of Georgetown and Brazos Valley, but like I said, Brazos Valley was opposed to the idea, so we'll see how it progresses. The mitigation program has not really changed since the last time I spoke with you. I've got one that needs to be processed through, and I think the other three that were in the basket last month are still waiting on diagnostics and work from the well drillers. So there'll be a slight change by the time we get back together next month. I think I know of at least 3 other applications that are outstanding that have not come in, but will be coming in possibly before next month. At the instruction of a couple of the committees, we went back and looked at the minutes where mitigation committees, where the mitigation program was discussed. We also went through and listened to the actual meeting itself. Thank you, Peggy. At no point, despite my recollection, was there a discussion of limiting the mitigation program to the free zone of Simsbury. There are exceptions for particular parts of the program, but the program itself was never, and as I recall, it was never limited to those two formations. So the documents were adopted, and the current position of the district would be that that mitigation program is open for all the formations within the district. If we want to make that change, we can make that change, but the recommendation from staff had previously been that we needed to open it up to all the major formations. So based on like I say, the minutes, the discussions the board had, I would roll that and say that we are currently open to all formations. And if you don't want to restrict it, then we can have that discussion. But for right now, that's where we're at with that one. Yes, ma'am.
Jim, we got a list of the people, you call it the well watch program mailing list, the
Yes, sir.
potential monitoring wells.
Yes, ma'am.
And you and I talked about that. And when I went through it, I noticed I knew several people on there, and I just suggested to Claire today that if we should all go through the list, see who we know, and let you or Claire know that we know them, and if we could reach out to them and kind of explain more about why we need their monitoring wells, it might be a little more persuasion than just that form letter coming out. So that was just-
It's not quite a form letter, but it's not part
I
of
know,
it. But yeah, if y'all can grease the skids with some of the people that are on that list, that would be fantastic. I think all of you should have copies of that list.
So we'll let Claire know.
We did not stop. We slowed down the process of mailing. So it'll be ready to go out even if they go in the mail tomorrow. My experience with USPS is it may be February before some of the people get them. But our plan is to get them in the mail at the end of this week. So you'll have several days to talk to anybody, on that list and let them
Okay.
know what's coming and why they're getting it.
Okay.
But, like I say, we didn't stop it. We just kind of slowed it down for a minute based on
Thank
the
you.
discussions I had with you. So anyway, we're proceeding. But yes, absolutely. Please follow up with anybody that's on that list that you know. Currently, we don't have any new pending permits, and I am unaware of upcoming meetings at this point in time. GMA 12 is tentatively scheduled, but once it's definitively scheduled, we'll get it on the district calendar and let y'all know. And I do appreciate those of you that drove to Milano to watch and or even watched online. I having that involvement from the district board is a good thing and a good sign for the public. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Those questions over.
Item 4O, consideration of future agenda items. For next month, I've got Dr. Hutchinson was going to report on the DFC conversion. And he was going to report on his Brazos Valley impact study. So I've got those two for September.
I talked with Bill this morning. He had just finished everything that he had on his plate prior to being able to start working on these for us. So I would guess he's gonna start working on those two items tomorrow morning and should have them ready for the meeting. Yes, sir.
All right, so that's, those are at least two items that I know of for the next agenda. Discussion, possible consideration, possible action on a district board meeting calendar, item P. Anybody?
Set the time. Time of the meeting,
Oh,
like 1:30.
yeah, we could try to revisit that. I
10:00, right?
possibly try to,
No, I'm just saying, could we
Before-
actually now based on this
possibly-
agenda item?
before, daylight savings time changes again.
Yeah.
Particular. Okay. Anything else? All right, last item, Q, 4Q, set date and location of next meeting. We'll be here in Giddings on Wednesday, September 18th. And with that, we will adjourn at 9 PM. Thank you.